If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 1, Riesel Brynhart. It was summer and the weather was clear. The warm sunlight spilled from the pristine sky, streaming through the window and illuminating the somewhat luxurious room. Riesel sat on an expensive large bed, covered halfway with a blanket. His complexion was slightly pale, but he appeared to be in good spirits, resembling someone recovering from a serious illness. Standing by the bedside was a priest. "It seems you're very energetic today, Mr. Riesel." The priest spoke while holding a notebook in one hand and a quill in the other. He seemed to be observing Riesel with a scrutinizing gaze, sporting a friendly smile. "Oh really?" Riesel, seemingly oblivious to the scrutiny, nodded in response to the priest. "I do feel much better today. I should be able to get out of bed without any issues." "That's good to hear," the priest remarked. "Your recovery is much faster than I anticipated. Although we still need to observe, it seems you'll be up and about soon." With that, the priest began writing down something on a bound parchment. Strange and mysterious symbols, resembling special runes, were swiftly written by the priest on the parchment. Riesel's attention was drawn to these symbols, not only on the parchment but also on the priest's body. The priest wore a golden-trimmed robe, adorned with runic patterns in various corners, giving him an air of mystery and subtle intellect. "As a precaution, I'll use magic to check on you," the priest said gently. "Excuse me." Setting aside the parchment and quill, the priest raised his hands to Riesel's chest. After a short while, obscure and hard-to-understand chants echoed from the priest's lips. A faint yet gentle glow emanated from his hands. The next moment, Riesel could clearly sense his body gradually warming up. It was as if an invisible warm current was flowing into him, enveloping him in unseen warm water. Not only did his body become pleasantly warm, but his mind and energy also improved. After a moment, the priest ceased his actions and withdrew his hands. Your body is completely healed. All the previous injuries have been treated." The priest nodded. "You should rest in bed for today and can start moving around tomorrow." As the priest spoke, there was a subtle sympathy and compassion in his eyes as he gazed at Riesel. With these emotions in mind, the priest hesitated for a moment but eventually urged. "Your body is fine now, but you shouldn't use magic anymore." The priest delicately continued. "The damage to the gate inside you is quite severe. It can no longer release magical energy. If you use magic indiscriminately, it may cause magical energy disorder inside you, and then..." The priest left the rest of the sentence unspoken. Nevertheless, Riesel responded with a faint smile and said, "I understand my condition. I won't do anything reckless." "Good." The priest nodded with a slight smile. "In that case, I'll take my leave. Miss should come to see you later. Please endure for a while and rest in bed." After a few more instructions, the priest quietly exited. Alone in the room, Riesel remained seated on the bed, silent for a long time. Ha. A few seconds later, Riesel let out an almost imperceptible sigh. "Magic, hey." Looking at his much younger-looking hands, which seemed paler than he remembered, Riesel murmured to himself. "Even if you asked me to use it, I probably wouldn't know where to start." After all, in the era and world he came from, the concept of magic was nothing more than a fantasy. It simply didn't exist. Yet in this world, it seemed to be a perfectly natural and expected phenomenon. Riesel couldn't help but recall events from a month ago. Recalling the moment he woke up, he realized he had arrived in a foreign world, encountering magic for the first time. The shock, confusion, and bewilderment of that time now seemed like a distant memory. At least, the current him had fully accepted the fact that he had transmigrated into this fantasy world. After a month, he had also come to understand the situation of this world. In a nutshell, this was a world of swords and magic, another world with extraordinary powers and mysterious forces. A month ago, he arrived in this world and embraced a new identity. The original owner of this identity was a native of this world, coincidentally sharing the same name as him. The only difference was that he was almost 30 in his previous life, while the Riesel of this world had just turned 17, undoubtedly much younger. Knock. Knock. Knock, asterisk. Just as Riesel couldn't help but sink into memories, the door suddenly got knocked by someone. "Riesel, are you awake?" Outside the door, a voice as light as the wind and as clear as water interrupted his reminiscence. "I'm awake." Riesel snapped back to reality and responded. "Come in." With those words, the door swung open. Standing there was a girl of roughly the same age as him. Dressed in a convenient and elegant dress, she exuded a noble aura from head to toe. With delicate features and a slender figure, her waist-length bright silver hair adorned her body, not appearing the least bit peculiar. On the contrary, it accentuated her nobility, adding a touch of grace that made every move pleasing to the eye. She walked in from the door with an air of natural elegance, radiating an indescribable sense of beauty. Even Riesel, who had grown somewhat accustomed, felt the urge to sigh in admiration. Of course, he didn't do that. As he watched the girl walking towards him, his face maintained a faint smile. "You're here again, Miss Yuri." Yuri Frenzel. That was the girl's name and the person who saved his life, bringing him to this place. At least, for Riesel, the girl was just that, a savior. If it were the original owner of his body, meeting her might have rendered him too nervous to speak, akin to a typical protagonist in some Japanese novels. Unfortunately, he wasn't this world Riesel. Even though he knew from the original owner's memory how noble and unattainable the girl before him was, he only held a heart full of gratitude. In response, Yuri shook her head. "Just call me Yuri, no need to be so formal." The girl's voice, just like when she was outside the door, was light as the wind and clear as water, genuinely pleasant. Riesel even thought, somewhat impolitely, that with a voice like hers, she was wasting her talent for not becoming a singer. "Judging by your appearance, it seems you've recovered quite well." Yuri sat down at his bedside, observing him carefully. "How are you feeling? Can you get out of bed?" "Tomorrow should be fine," Riesel replied, expressing gratitude. "Thanks for your care, Miss Yuri. I'll repay this favor sooner or later." "I've said it before, no need to be so formal," Yuri sighed lightly. "Your current situation is somewhat related to me. It's strange to see you so polite now. Wouldn't it be better if you were like in the beginning?" Maybe recalling that time improved her mood somehow. But this left him somewhat speechless. Back then, his attitude was far from good. He just couldn't help it. When he first transmigrated into this world, he woke up in bed, in excruciating pain with severe injuries all over, while an unknown girl stood by his side. His initial reaction was naturally filled with hostility and caution. If it weren't for later realizing that something extraordinary happened to his body, Riesel would have thought he stumbled upon a dirty conspiracy, and some people were trying to harm him again. Memories from his previous life flowed through, causing a slight ache in his heart. Thinking about it, my situation in this world doesn't seem much different from my previous world. Riesel self-mocked in his mind. Not knowing what he was thinking, Yuri noticed his sudden silence and changed the topic, whether intentionally or unintentionally. "Still no way to repair your gate?" Yuri inquired. Though it seemed like a change of topic, what she brought up was, to some extent, more sensitive than their previous conversation. "No." Riesel maintained his calm expression. "The damage seems quite extensive, with no signs of recovery. I was just warned not to use magic." "Really?" Yuri sounded somewhat regretful. In this world, the ability to use magic directly determines one's social status. To use magic, one needed a certain amount of magical energy. Magical energy was the fuel for magic. Without it, magic was impossible. Fortunately, people in this world were born with magical energy. The difference lay in the quantity. Some had more, some had less, and some had enough to use magic, while others did not. The so-called gate referred to a kind of nerve in the human body with magical properties. It served as a switch, a channel, and a storage for storing magical energy, the source of using magic. Once the gate was damaged, it became difficult to call upon magical energy. In severe cases, the stored magical energy could be lost entirely. His gate was damaged. What's more, it was intentionally damaged by someone. "Have you found out who did it?" Riesel asked nonchalantly. "Who wants to harm me?" This was the reason he ended up in this place. He, or rather, his body's original owner, was murdered a month ago. He was severely injured and didn't make it through. Riesel thus transmigrated, took the dead body, saved by Yuri, and spent a whole month recovering in this luxurious mansion as Riesel Brynhart. Chapter 2, Dimensional Magic Cube. Riesel Brynhart was a genius. Not because of his keen insight or exceptionally high innate skill, but simply because the world had favored him, giving him a natural advantage over many others. He wasn't some influential figure with a background that reached the skies. On the contrary, he hailed from the ignored countryside, where generations of his family were farmers, and even his grandfather was a slave. One can easily imagine how humble his origins were. Yet, Riesel was undeniably fortunate. He was born with an abundance of magical energy. Recognizing this, unwilling to be just a farmer or a slave, he abandoned the plan to be handed over to a lord by his grandfather and family. Escaping from the obscure rural territory of his childhood, he made his way to the estate of a great noble. There, he participated in the entrance test for the National Magic School, which happened to be held there. His naturally powerful magical energy effortlessly caught the attention of the higher UPS at the magic school. He was smoothly ushered into the continent's most prestigious academy, becoming a sensation in the renowned institution. Riesel Brinhart's reputation as a genius stemmed precisely from this. His insight wasn't extraordinary, and his innate skill in magic wasn't exceptionally high. Still, because of his outstanding innate magical energy, he became the envy of many. All of this was because in this world, though everyone had magical energy, its quantity was a natural talent determined at birth and couldn't be changed through effort later. In other words, the amount of magical energy one's body possessed at birth determined their magical ability throughout their life. This meant that many people were destined from birth to never become magicians, no matter how hard they tried. Conversely, some who were blessed with an abundance of magical energy could effortlessly become magicians, performing high-rank, high-powered magic that others could only dream of, making them so-called geniuses. Riesel Brinhart was one such person. He was praised by many. He was complimented by many. People gathered around him, and even some highly influential figures tried to win his favor. The kingdom itself valued him greatly, it was said that even the king remembered his name. Now, the question arises. What happens to a humble, inexperienced country boy, who has been living a simple life, when he comes to the big city and is showered with compliments, support and praise from everyone? After experiencing the temptations of the dazzling world, what does he become? Will he, like the main characters in some novels, strive hard, resist all temptations, and become the strongest, fundamentally changing his fate? No. At least, Riesel could confidently say one thing. In this kind of environment, the possibility of a person turning bad is countless times greater than the possibility of turning good. The original owner of the body knew this well. Amidst the praise, compliments, flattery, and support from those around him, the original owner easily forgot about hard work, forgot about diligence, and fell into the sugar-coated bullets of others, unable to free himself. The result was that the original owner became completely ignorant and incompetent, relying on the so-called talent as an excuse. He spent his days indulging in pleasure with some noble children. Although he didn't reach the point of bullying and oppressing others, he gradually became so arrogant that no one else mattered. He became self-conceited, thinking he had surpassed everyone else, unwilling to associate with those of humble birth, and spent his days fooling around with a group of noble children. Finally, the calamity that would wake the original owner from his dream arrived. On a night just a month ago, after fooling around with a group of noble children and preparing to return to the academy, he was attacked. He not only suffered severe injuries but also had the gate in his body destroyed, rendering him unable to use magic. From here, the fall from grace of this genius began. Understanding this, the original owner met a tragic end. His final thoughts were not of regret for everything he had done so far, but rather an unwillingness to accept the future of returning to the days as a lackey. In such a situation, Riesel arrived and replaced this world Riesel, then brought by Yuri, who mistakenly thought he had been successfully rescued, back to her mansion. For this body's original owner, Riesel had no sympathy or pity. This outcome could be considered self-inflicted, Riesel remarked inwardly. In his previous life, Riesel's environment was somewhat similar to the original owner's, filled with sweet words and flattery. However, unlike the original owner, Riesel saw through the true faces behind the smiling facades of those people, feeling disgusted by their ulterior motives and the environment he was in. Now, having left his original world and entered another world was a kind of liberation for him. With this in mind, Riesel originally had no intention of investigating the attack on his body's original owner. However, the problem seemed to be not as simple as he had imagined. "I've ordered an investigation," Yuri said while slightly furrowing her brows. "No results?" Riesel asked calmly. Seeing her reaction, he immediately guessed the outcome. "Sure enough," she nodded. "The attacker is deeply hidden. Whether it's the attack that injured you a month ago or the assassination attempt half a month ago, the attackers are hired underground figures. Investigating them leads nowhere." Yes, just half a month ago, Riesel once again faced an attack. Initially, he thought that the reason for the attack on the original owner was simply due to offending someone or being envied by someone. But during the time he was recuperating in Yuri's mansion, someone infiltrated this mansion. Taking advantage of the night when everyone was asleep, they attempted to assassinate him. Fortunately, although this mansion belonged only to Yuri, the security measures were well in place. There were always guards patrolling, and a magic alarm was set up. She was able to reach his room at the first sign of the assassin infiltrating and apprehending them. Otherwise, he wouldn't be lying in bed now, he would probably be in a grave. This was clearly abnormal. To hire an assassin who can infiltrate even this mansion, the other party is not only deeply hidden but also has a complicated identity. Riesel commented calmly, making Yuri somewhat surprised. However, his observation was correct. Even though it was just a mansion, the ability to infiltrate here meant that the other party had significant skills. After all, this was where she, Yuri Frenzel, resided. Someone who could hire such a skilled assassin would undoubtedly have a strong background, both in identity and ability. I really want to know what reason could make such a figure target me, Riesel said while smiling calmly at Yuri, seemingly unaffected by his precarious situation. Yuri deeply looked at him before speaking. I will continue to investigate. Before that, you can rest assured here. Although rare, there are methods to temporarily mend the completely damaged gate. I will watch for you temporarily, I hope you don't give up on yourself. I won't. Riesel nodded without showing approval or disapproval. Thank you. No need. Yuri smiled lightly, as graceful as an orchid in full bloom. After a few more exchanges, she stood up. I won't disturb you, you rest well. With that, Yuri gracefully moved away, leaving behind a faint fragrance as she exited the room. Riesel watched her depart, but his mind was not as calm as it appeared on the surface. Who could it be? He tried to recall the original owner's memories, suspecting one person after another among those the original owner knew. Nobles and commoners ignored by the original owner, even the people from the countryside when the original owner was still living there, all fell under suspicion, yet without any concrete result. The clues are too few. The original owner's memories might not be reliable. Maybe, the mastermind behind the scenes was someone the original owner had overlooked, perhaps a person so easily forgettable that he didn't even bother to remember. If it was me, I would never allow such a thing to happen, Riesel thought to himself. Life experiences from his previous life had instilled in him the habit of suspecting anyone, never intentionally ignoring anyone. Also, because of these experiences, he deeply understood one thing. The other party surely hasn't given up, they will continue to target me, sending people to kill me again and again. Yuri's identity was prestigious, and the environment she was in was extremely sensitive and crucial. The fact that the other party was willing to send someone to assassinate him showed their strong determination. This lack of security left him, who had similarly suffered from such situations in his previous life, feeling very uneasy. Next time, who will they send? Will they be more powerful than the last assassin? Will Yuri be able to come to my rescue in time? Each question told Riesel how unstable and unsafe his current situation was. Moreover, Yuri saving him wasn't without reason. If not for some reason, given the lack of interaction between his body's original owner and her, who even seemed to be in a somewhat formal relationship, she would not have sheltered him for a whole month for free, considering it good enough to save his life when he was near death. Riesel didn't want to entrust his life and death to someone else's hands. He had to protect himself. He had to find a way to escape this powerless situation. But this was a difficult task. With his gate completely damaged, Riesel couldn't even use the most basic magic. In this world of swords and magic, how could he protect himself? Fortunately, he wasn't entirely helpless. Closing his eyes, Riesel sank his consciousness into his mind. In a trance, he seemed to see something in the ocean of consciousness. A shining, dazzling magic cube radiating a brilliant glow, transparent throughout. He allowed his consciousness to make contact. The next moment, a thought was directly sensed by him. Dimensional Magic Cube, start. Chapter 3, Is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon? As is well known, the reason for the appearance of the phenomenon of transmigration or reincarnation is that 99% of the time, the main character possesses cheats. Riesel was no exception. On his first day in this world, he discovered a transparent cube, called the Dimensional Magic Cube. It could only exist within his mind, impossible to extract or inspect. Apart from him, no one else could perceive its existence. The cube's function was as its name suggested, related to dimensions. Dimensional Magic Cube's instructions. 1. The dimensional magic cube can automatically absorb the energy that exists in the world. Once a month, it can randomly open a dimensional channel and perform dimensional travel. 2. The dimensional magic cube can convert various powers from different worlds, ready to be activated and used at any time. 3. There is a storage space inside the dimensional magic cube, which can be opened and used at any time. 4. When opening a dimensional channel to a personally selected world, it needs to consume 10 times the energy. 5. When carrying items for dimensional travel, you need to consume the corresponding energy according to the value of the items. 6. The time limit for each dimensional travel is 1 day in the main world. 7. With the usage instructions and methods received a month ago when Riesel first encountered the dimensional magic cube, he remained calm and tied in this new world. Even knowing that his gate was completely damaged and his ability to use magic was gone, with someone secretly watching his life, he maintained composure, thanks to this mysterious dimensional magic cube. Of course, even without the dimensional magic cube, he wouldn't panic or sit idly by. Murder attempts were nothing new to him, and he was already accustomed to facing them without any reliance on his previous life. The injuries are all healed. I've been lying in bed for a whole month. I can use the random dimensional travel function, right? Whether it was Yuri or the priest insisting Riesel rest for another day, he decided to make the most of this day. Without further ado, he closed his eyes and lay down, beginning to operate the dimensional magic cube. Activate the dimensional channel. As his consciousness conveyed instructions to the dimensional magic cube, the transparent cube began rotating in his mind. Instructions accepted, starting the activation of the dimensional channel. Sufficient energy, beginning the construction of the dimensional channel. Built successfully. Suddenly, the transparent cube in his mind moved. It initially rotated like a 3D animation, each cell detaching from the main body, breaking down into numerous transparent cells that rotated and interlaced. Before long, the interlaced transparent cells formed a passage, extending to the end of his consciousness, disappearing into the invisible void. Finished with the opening of the dimensional channel, the information collection has been completed. Searching for highly compatible information with the world on the other side of the channel from the user's memory. Now conducting an arrangement. Successfully arranged. Connected world, is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon? Time ratio, 1:100. Dimensional travel is the descent of consciousness, in which the user's consciousness is materialized in another world. Death of the consciousness after materialization will not affect the user, but the dimensional travel will end at the time of death. Please be careful. Upon receiving these messages from the dimensional magic cube, Riesel was stunned on the spot. Certainly, the reason he was stunned had nothing to do with anything else. Regardless of the form of the dimensional travel or the difference in time ratios, upon his initial encounter with the dimensional magic cube, he gained relevant information from its usage instructions. Therefore, concerning the difference in time ratios between the two worlds, Riesel had long been aware, even understanding that this dimensional travel would only send his consciousness and not his entire being. This was why he regarded the dimensional magic cube as a reliance and remained calm from start to finish. Due to the difference in time ratios, even if the dimensional channel exists for only 1 day in the main world, in another world, Riesel would have plenty of time to explore and develop. Since the dimensional travel only sent his consciousness, even if he were to die when he was in another world, he wouldn't be affected. At most, it would mark the end of this particular journey. In this way, he could fully utilize the difference in time ratios and the absolutely safe situation to seek power and solutions. This was his plan. However, he did not anticipate that the dimensional channel opened by the dimensional magic cube would ultimately connect to such a world. Is it really that world? Danmachi. Riesel expressed both surprise and delight. The surprise was due to the unexpected destination of the dimensional travel not being some unfamiliar world but a world he had seen, experienced, and known. The delight stemmed from this revelation. After all, in this world, while Riesel may not know it like the back of his hand, he was familiar with a considerable amount of information, even the so-called plot. In this way, he could save time and energy by leveraging his understanding of this world, and obtaining what he wanted based on that knowledge. Indeed, this world had what he desired. It was a fantasy world where all races lived together in harmony, primarily composed of humans and demi-humans. There, humans were not the only intelligent beings, various races such as dwarves, beastmen, palom, elves, and Amazonesses coexist. Even beings like gods were present. These gods, for the sake of experiencing mortal life, departed their mundane heavens devoid of any entertainment, voluntarily sealed their divine powers known as Arcanum, and descended to the lower world where humans and demi-humans reside. They grant mortals the power called Fauna to attract them to join their established familial factions known as Familia and establish a foothold in the lower world. I remember, once receiving Fauna, one could enhance their abilities, level up, and grow stronger by defeating monsters, enemies, and opponents, gaining Excelia in the process, akin to EXP in a game. For Riesel, who currently had neither the time nor inclination for slow and steady practice, this method of gaining power was undoubtedly the perfect solution. Joining a Familia and receiving Fauna, that was his swift path to getting stronger. Defeating enemies meant getting stronger. Subjugating monsters meant getting stronger. Even a bit of training meant getting stronger. Having Excelia meant getting stronger. This first world for dimensional travel seems tailor-made for me. Realizing this, while not overly excited, Riesel couldn't help but feel a subtle surge of anticipation. The time ratio is 1:100, right? In other words, 1 day in the main world was equivalent to 100 days in another world. The dimensional travel's time limit was just 1 day in the main world. This meant, under the current time ratio, Riesel could spend 100 days in another world. Can I break free from my current trouble in almost 3.5 months, assuming everything goes smoothly? Riesel didn't know. But he had no other choice right now. So, with determination, he directed his consciousness towards the dimensional channel in his mind, allowing it to pass through the dimensional channel and begin to travel to another world. As for Riesel himself, he remained lying in bed, seemingly in a deep sleep. To onlookers, he appeared to be nothing more than having a peaceful sleep. Little did they know, his consciousness had long departed to another world, no longer present in this world. Time, it seemed, had lost its meaning in this split second. Riesel didn't know how long he had wandered in the dimensional channel, nor did he know how much time had passed before he emerged from the channel. All he could sense was that he was like a ghost, drifting lightly in a tunnel of light with no visible end, as if he had been flying for a very long time. After an unknown duration, his surroundings brightened, and a sudden heaviness spread from head to toe. No, it wasn't that his body suddenly became heavy, but rather his consciousness, which had no weight before, suddenly materialized and regained its weight. A feeling of being grounded spread beneath him. Around him, there was a burst of noise. Almost reflexively, he opened his eyes, allowing the scene in front of him to imprint on his eyes. Immediately, he was stunned. A street filled with otherworldly charm had abruptly entered his view. The bustling street didn't resemble any modern scene in his memory, instead, it was filled with fantasy flavors. Dwarves with strong bodies wore weapons and armor, walking with powerful, resounding footsteps. Beastmen with animal-like ears and tails, along with human women, chatted and laughed. Elves with pointed ears and exceptionally beautiful appearances bathed in praise from others as they crossed the street. Small people akin to children and a brown-skinned girl chased each other and played. And all around were buildings resembling those from the medieval era, full of historical charm. A fresh and colorful fantasy world appeared before Riesel amid the noisy commotion, telling him that at this moment, he stood on such a street, in such a scenery. Despite just arriving in this world and recently gaining body, his arrival didn't attract the attention of anyone on the street. Whether human or demi-human, they all naturally passed by him as if he had always been on this street, without a hint of feeling out of place. Perhaps this was thanks to his current attire? Riesel's main world was a world of swords and magic, not much different in era and style from this world. This made him fit seamlessly into this world, everything appearing so natural. After a while, he laughed. He laughed genuinely for the first time. Let's start with this world. Muttering those words, Riesel took a step forward and began his journey in another world. Chapter 4, You Are My Child. It was unclear whether it was a coincidence or not, but this world was just like the main one, currently in the midst of summer. The hustle and bustle of the city added an extra spark to the summer here, making it seem a bit hotter compared to the original world. Walking amidst the crowd, with stalls constantly calling out to attract customers on the bustling streets, Riesel strolled casually like a traveler, brushing shoulders with the locals. It seems like language barriers aren't much of a problem for me. Listening to the continuous sounds around him and observing the storefronts and signboards posted on each stall, he confirmed this. Whether it was the main world or this one, the language and writing used were different from what he learned in his previous life. However, he could naturally understand the language of people from this world and comprehend the written words. It fascinated him for quite a while. In the main world, there was no issue since he received the memories of his body's original owner, and understanding the language and letters was expected. But being able to do the same in this world made him wonder if there was a specific reason for it. Is it the influence of the dimensional magic cube? Riesel could only think of that possibility. The dimensional magic cube, capable of freely converting powers between different worlds, might not find it difficult to help its user grasp languages from various worlds. Thanks to this, after wandering around a bit and interacting with a few locals, he roughly figured out where he was. As expected, this is the Labyrinth City, Orario. Labyrinth City, Orario. This was the main stage of the original work, a city with an extremely special and crucial status. Built on top of an underground labyrinth, it suppressed the labyrinth called dungeon below, like a fortress lid, preventing the monsters inside from escaping outside. Due to the existence of the dungeon and its monsters, countless races converged in this city, seeking adventure and the unknown, making this city the unparalleled bustling city above ground. Therefore, it was considered the center of the world, excelling in adventure, trade, entertainment, and conflict, attracting many experts, merchants, and even gods. This works out perfectly. Riesel nodded and spoke inwardly. With the dungeon here and so many monsters to subjugate, after receiving a blessing from a god, I can also grow at the fastest rate. Moreover, being the main stage of the original work, many familiar people, events, and things were here, allowing him, who was familiar with the plot, to gain the advantage of knowing the future and receiving tangible or intangible help. The current top priority should be to quickly find a familia to join. Riesel began to ponder. A familia was a developmental organization and a family force established by the gods for their own purposes. The gods bestowed the power of fauna upon mortals, allowing them to transcend the ordinary and possess abilities far beyond mortals. Those who received fauna joined a god's familia as the god's child, following their familia's policies and providing the resources necessary for their familia and their god to continue operating and surviving. Strictly speaking, it was a mutually beneficial, interdependent relationship. Of course, mortals varied in quality, some strong and some weak, and the same went for the familia. Although the blessing received from any god didn't differ fundamentally, due to differences in management philosophy and operational methods, the strength, influence, and position of major familias varied. Some familias were newly established or struggling, making them relatively weak. Others thrived, with numerous members, making them much more powerful, gathering various experts and resources. There were also familias primarily established for business, with members lacking combat power. Some familias even existed and operated outside of Orario in the form of nations. This was just the basic difference. If one delved deeper, factors such as the personality of the god who established the familia, the internal environment of the familia, and the presence of negative influences had to be considered. If one accidentally joined a god that saw their familia and children as money-making machines or as mere entertainment, it was basically a game over. After all, gods in this world voluntarily sealed their arcanum as they descended to the lower world for the sake of playing. Most of them were all about pleasure and entertainment. Choosing which familia to join required careful consideration and prudent selection. If I remember correctly, in Orario, the strongest seems to be Loki familia, Freya familia, and Ganesha familia, right? The prefix name of a familia referred to the god who established it. For example, the founder of Loki familia was the famous god of mischief from Norse mythology Loki. But unlike the male counterpart in true mythology, Loki in this world was a female. As Riesel recalled the long-lost original work, he strolled through the streets and suddenly found himself in a somewhat familiar place. Just beyond the bustling main street, a much taller and larger building than the surrounding area appeared. Several high-rise towers overlapped, resembling a mountain of sorts, and a flag fluttered atop the central tower. The flag depicted a clown as if showing a comical smile to the people on the ground, particularly eye-catching. The somewhat familiar building and flag made Riesel stop in his tracks. Loki familia, hey! The clown flag, precisely the symbol of Loki familia, one of Orario's strongest familias, Riesel unexpectedly found himself in the heart of their base. Could it be this is fate? As the sun set, Orario was enveloped in the glow of the evening sky. The people finishing a day's work and the adventurers returning from the dungeon strolled through the streets with a mix of exhaustion and involuntary relaxation, transforming the city into the embrace of the night. In a corner of the street bathed in the twilight hues, a figure of a woman with long, casually tied crimson hair and eyes squinted, walked with an elegant yet strangely messy appearance. Though possessing a refined countenance, she exuded an air of nonchalance and a lack of seriousness. Humming a tune, she strolled casually, but her hums faded as she lost interest. Ugh, so boring, wandered around all day and found nothing amusing. The woman grumbled in a tone that sounded oddly down to earth. All the kids are off on expeditions, and only a few are left at home. And they all claim to have work to do, refusing to come out and play with me. That's not the worst part. I went out to have some fun myself, and those guys who are usually desperate for a party seem to have taken some strange medicine. Not a single one showed up today. Boring, just plain boring. I want to play patty cake with cute girls and have some lovey-dovey time with Ace. Walking with a swagger, the woman continued her lamentations, making remarks that were far from flattering, causing pedestrians to instinctively steer clear. Unaware of the effect of her remarks on others, she continued to sigh. Let's just go home and have a drink. If I calculate the time correctly, everyone should be back soon. I can endure a few more days. After saying that, the woman turned into the road beyond the bustling main street and reached the mountain of sorts-shaped buildings Twilight Manor. On the highest tower amid the multitude of towers, a flag depicting a clown still swayed in the wind. Suddenly, the laid-back woman stopped in her tracks. For no particular reason. It just, on the manor's gate, someone stood there. A human boy. The woman recognized the person's race and gender, and her initially squinted eyes widened slightly. Inside, an unusual brightness for a mere mortal glimmered. Especially when she saw the other person, who had clearly seen her as well. Yet, the boy remained standing by the gate, openly locking eyes with her. His figure showed no signs of wavering, and this display immediately piqued her interest. I see, is he waiting for me? In an instant, the woman seemed to see through the boy's intentions and burst into hearty laughter. Her smile, reminiscent of the clown's whimsical grin hanging on the flag at the highest point of Twilight Manor, added an inexplicable touch to the atmosphere. Interesting. When such a feeling arose in the woman's heart, there was no suspense about what action should be taken next. To see something interesting and want to get closer was the nature of gods. Tired of the heavenly life, willingly sealed their arcanum to pursue entertainment in the lower world and roamed freely like mortals. The woman, or rather, the goddess, fully played out this trait, walking straight toward the human boy. Hey, kid, what are you doing here by yourself? The Norse goddess Loki greeted the boy who had just arrived in this world today, standing nonchalantly at the entrance of her Familia's base. In response, the boy simply flashed a calm and steady smile. I have no place to go. That's what the boy said. Simple and concise. Although it was not a particularly glorious situation, the boy's attitude was so calm and seemed almost indifferent to his own unfortunate circumstances. But Loki knew he wasn't lying. Even though her arcanum was sealed, as a goddess who had survived for countless eons, her divine insight and knowledge were sufficient to see through many things that mortals thought were profound. Based on this, it was almost impossible for mortals to hide something from her. Do you want me to take you in? The comical smile on Loki's face seemed to be getting thicker as she asked that. Yes. The boy nodded straight. Good. Loki said joyfully without any hesitation while still grinning. From today on, you are my child. Was this just a whim of the goddess, or was there a deeper meaning? No one knew. There was only one thing certain. Ariel had successfully joined Loki Familia. In just a few words. Chapter 5, Blessing. Twilight Manor, Central Tower's top floor. This was Loki's divine room. In simpler terms, it was Loki's room, filled with all sorts of odds and ends. There were expensive-looking quill pens on the table, along with mysterious crystals sporting a faint rainbow hue. On the walls hang ancient-looking shoes and hats. The bed was almost buried under heaps of thick books and ornate short swords. Even the corners of the room were stacked with small storage units, containing bottles of various shapes and colors. Guided by Loki, Ariel arrived in this room. Come in. Loki casually pushed open the door and strode into the room. Excuse the mess. Ariel, feeling oddly polite, first stood at the doorway, bowed slightly, then entered the divine room. Come, sit here. Loki was quite enthusiastic, resembling a child who just got a new toy. In high spirits, she brought a chair for Ariel, sweeping aside the various clutter, and invited him to take a seat. Observing the carefree and unrestrained goddess, Riesel couldn't help but find it peculiar even though he was aware of her personality. After all, even in his previous life, entities associated with the term God were highly revered, and not to be treated with any disrespect. Silently contemplating this, he sat down in response to her invitation, while glancing around the room. On the other hand, Loki kept a close eye on him from beginning to end, wearing the always mischievous smile. Sorry, most of the kids from the Familia are out on a dungeon expedition, couldn't throw you a lively welcome party. Loki said with a cheerful grin. No problem. Riesel withdrew his gaze from the surroundings and shook his head. I'm not much of a fan of lively gatherings, so this is fine. I can tell. You're that kind of person. Loki nodded approvingly, then added, but, whether you like it or not, now that you've joined my Familia, you're part of the family. Being too isolated won't do, you know. I know. Riesel smiled calmly at Loki. If it's someone worth interacting with, I won't isolate myself. Someone worth interacting with, hey. Loki's expression turned subtle, but she shrugged it off. Okay then, for now, let's leave it at that. I don't want to preach to a newcomer. We can save that for later. With that, she propped her chin with one hand, lifted one foot to rest on the other thigh, and gazed at him with her narrowed eyes and the ever-present smile on her face. So, you're still free, and haven't received any blessings at all, yet. At Loki's question, Riesel deliberately ignored her probing gaze and nodded naturally. I haven't received any blessings since I just arrived in Orario today. Before this, I haven't met any gods or been a part of any Familia. Riesel knew that lying was futile in the presence of this world's gods. So, he wouldn't engage in any meaningless deception, every word and action appeared remarkably honest. I guess so. Loki smirked. If you had anything special, you wouldn't be standing there at the gate and waiting for me. What is Loki Familia? One of the strongest familias in Orario, a faction second to none in this world and dubbed as one of the strongest familias of Orario, alongside Freya Familia, known far and wide. For such a powerful familia, there was no shortage of people wanting to join. But, joining Loki Familia wasn't as easy as it seemed. Not to mention Loki Familia, even a weaker familia would have some requirements for new members to join. They wouldn't just accept anyone randomly. Generally speaking, if you want to join a famous familia, you must have some exceptional qualities. If you've been part of a familia before and received blessings, then it's about your strength. If you've never been part of a familia or never received blessings, then it's about your potential. The former was another matter, but the latter usually depended on race and innate skills. After all, in this world, there were beings known as demi-humans. Beastmen had naturally keen senses and various innate skills depending on the classification. Dwarves were widely recognized for their strength and stamina, surpassing other races in both. Amazonesses, despite being only female, were known for their combat prowess and indomitable vitality. Elves were magical races, able to perform miracles and mysteries to some extent even without receiving fauna. Compared to demi-humans, humans didn't have many special traits. In such a situation, if Riesel, as a mere human, approached Loki Familia, one of the strongest, expressing a desire to join, he would likely be rejected at the door by the gatekeeper without even having the chance to meet the god of the Familia. Fortunately, he was well aware of this, so he never considered a direct visit. He knew what kind of situation he would face, which was why he chose to wait at the gate for Loki. Rather than dealing with mortals who assessed people's worth in a very practical way, it was better to face gods who acted on whims and were often unpredictable. That way, he could achieve his goal more effectively. Riesel made this decision based on that point. For this reason, he even prepared himself mentally for a long resistance, ready to wait for days. He couldn't believe that Loki, known as a free-spirited goddess, would stay confined within the base forever. As it turned out, his idea was correct. Let's get those clothes off first. Loki said while dragging a chair and sitting behind Riesel. Just the top will do. He nodded and unbuttoned his shirt, exposing his back to her. TCH, nice skin. Better than those little girls back in our Familia. Loki remarked, marveling at Riesel's bare back. Meanwhile, she casually picked up a box. In the box was a needle. As she took the needle in hand, she began to speak while still gazing at his bare back. What do you know about fauna? Loki's question made Riesel pause for a moment, lost in thought. After a while, he spoke cautiously, relying on his memory. As far as I know, it's a power that uses the sacred text, the language of the gods, engraving it onto the mortal body through God's blood as a medium which will enhance their abilities. This power acts as a catalyst, turning the experiences gained through various actions into powerful abilities, accelerating and amplifying them to facilitate rapid growth. Yab. Loki agreed with his explanation. The excelia, invisible to the naked eye of the mortals, is essentially your own history. We gods use fauna to extract this history, turning it into nourishment for your growth. It allows you to grow at an unimaginable speed and get stronger. That's the only role we gods play in the lower world. With that, Loki pricked her own finger with the needle, and a drop of blood oozed out. Using the blood, she drew a pattern on Riesel's back. He could feel her fingertip sliding on his back. However, his attention was soon diverted by her voice. With sacred text as the guide and the blood of the gods as the medium, we depict your abilities in a concrete numerical way. So, fauna is also known as status. Anyone who can read the sacred text can visually confirm the abilities of those blessed by us. Loki's voice seemed to distance itself, becoming mysterious. Status is basically divided into 4 parts: basic abilities, development abilities, magic, and skill, with level being the most crucial. Development abilities aside, that's an extra thing you may get when leveling up. You won't have it right after receiving the blessing. Basic abilities are strength, str, endurance, and dexterity, dex, agility, agi, and magic, mag, a total of 5. Each has ranks from S to I, indicating the strength of the ability. The closer to S, the stronger the ability. T/N, I'll use abbreviations for basic abilities to differentiate them more easily from other terms. Level, as the name suggests, is the most direct standard for distinguishing strength. The higher the level, the stronger. The improvement in basic abilities compared to level is incomparable. Basic abilities only improve one aspect, while level improvement is a complete body and mind evolution. You can think of leveling up as mortals approaching our level. As for magic and skill, the former is a power that can trigger supernatural phenomena. Originally, only a few magic races could use it. But after receiving the blessing, people of any race have a chance to possess it, from 1 to 3. The latter brings special effects under certain conditions, not as visually powerful as magic races but without quantity limits. Loki's voice took on an inexplicable inducement as it echoed in Riesel's ears. Speaking of which, both magic and skill, when inspired through fauna, are intimately related to yourselves. They are directly linked to your interests and approval of something, almost like materializing the power of imagination and longing in your heart. You can try asking yourself, recalling your life, maybe something will be triggered. With Loki's explanation, Riesel involuntarily began to recall his previous life, a life that was not worth looking back on. Chapter 6, The Haunting Past. In his previous life, Riesel's background was completely extreme compared to his current one. Unlike the original owner of the body he possessed at the moment, he didn't come from humble beginnings in the countryside. Instead, he was born into a wealthy family, growing up as the pampered young master with a golden spoon in his mouth. However, Riesel wasn't just a rich second generation, he belonged to the affluent third generation. His grandfather, once the richest tycoon who started from scratch, had fought for decades, strategically riding the waves of the times, seizing opportunities, and overshadowing countless competitors. In theory, being born into such a family should have made Riesel the object of envy and jealousy for many. But fate played a joke on him. Riesel wasn't a rich second generation. His biological father, as the second generation, was the stereotypical indulged playboy, ignorant, incompetent, and spending his time in revelry, relying on his family background to bully others. He embodied the typical antagonist in most urban novels. Riesel wasn't a child willingly born out of the union and love between his mother and his father. Instead, he was the result of an accident that his biological mother had to accept reluctantly due to his grandfather's compulsory order. In such circumstances, one can easily imagine the treatment Riesel received after his birth. His biological father rarely returned home, behaving as if he didn't exist, continuing his debauched lifestyle without any change from before or after marriage. His biological mother didn't fare any better. Her goal in the first place was to approach his father with a plan to marry into a wealthy family and become a wealthy wife. After achieving her goal, she led a life of luxury, playing around independently from her husband. The extent of her extravagance outside was said to surpass her husband's. Given these circumstances, his childhood could be described as being in almost an orphan state. As for his grandfather, unlike his parents, the grandfather treated him as if he were a tool. Perhaps due to complete disappointment in his son, the grandfather subjected him to strict education, making him remember various textbooks, study guides, high society etiquette, and financial enlightenment since he could remember. Riesel's childhood passed in this manner. Fortunately, he had an outstanding memory from childhood, bordering on the exceptional. Though not to the level of photographic memory, whenever he put effort into memorizing, regardless of comprehension, he could rapidly recall a variety of knowledge. This led to excellent achievements from infancy to maturity, which pleased his grandfather. Yet, because of his exceptional memory, he vividly remembered many events from infancy to maturity clearly, such as the kidnapping attempt at 6, the near-fatal accident with a crazed driver at 12, and the poison discovered in the toasts from relatives during his birthday at 18. Encounters that were basically impossible for an ordinary person, events that should have happened in TV dramas or novels, unfolded in his life. He couldn't believe these dirty deeds were real, yet they repeatedly occurred. Gradually, Riesel became numb and accustomed. He became numb to the occasional threats on his life. He got used to having his food checked for poison before every meal. Even when his grandfather arranged a marriage for him with a supposedly suitable match, a woman nearly 100 pounds heavier than him, he didn't voice any objections. However, from that moment on, Riesel began seeking various thrills obsessively. Rock climbing, parkour, bungee jumping, surfing, extreme off-roading, extreme water skiing, extreme rollerblading, skydiving, hang gliding, and so on. He did it all. He even survived in the wild in a forest, as if seeking more stimulation. It was during this process that he accidentally obtained the dimensional magic cube, transporting him to the world of swords and magic. Now, looking back on his life, his heart was filled not with anything else but intense anger. What have I gained in this life? What have I pursued in this life? Nothing. Everything was against his will. Everything was not what he desired. As Riesel reminisced about his previous life, he felt he had gained nothing. The anger in his heart wasn't directed at others but at himself. It was directed at the self that seemed to have everything but actually had nothing. If that's the case, let go of everything from the past. Since he had already left his previous world, this time, he vowed to live for himself to the fullest. I will run towards the direction I desire. I will pursue what I want. If I can't, then I won't stop moving forward. Let the numbness from his previous life end here. In this life, even if he had to exert all efforts, he must stride forward, reaching out for that unattainable wish. As Riesel made this pledge in his heart, suddenly, he felt it. Behind him, the finger that had been continuously moving until just now, sketching something, came to a halt. Really? Loki's voice was no longer distant, instead, it sounded as if she were astonished or muttering to herself. What happened? Riesel instantly shook off the haunting memories, then asked doubtfully. However, this question did not elicit any response. Loki remained silent, causing Riesel to furrow his brow in perplexity. He ha ha ha. Not long after, Loki burst into laughter, the volume increasing with each moment, growing more excited. When Riesel couldn't resist turning to look at her, he found she was already standing up, dancing and gesturing wildly. I've struck gold. I've hit the jackpot. Loki, the goddess of the Loki Familia, one of the strongest familias in Orario, seemed to have gone mad, dancing and laughing uproariously. First Finn, now Riesel. My luck in the lower world has definitely improved. After a long time, I've found a gem on the streets again, and this time, it's a damn good haul. Freya, see how you can compete with me now. Ha 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 ha. Loki was so excited that Riesel took a step back, finding her eccentric behavior a bit overwhelming. What the hell? Riesel could only mumble helplessly. He. After a while, she seemed to have gotten her fill of madness. With a mischievous grin, she approached him. Seeing this, Riesel reflexively tried to put on his clothes. Don't. Loki quickly stopped him, the excitement on her face impossible to conceal. I haven't imprinted your status yet. After saying that, she took out a piece of parchment from somewhere, and her squinted eyes opened wide. Inside, the sacred text that even Riesel couldn't understand flowed. Take a good look at the blessing you've received, kiddo. Loki said with a smile that was hard to conceal. Don't blink, okay. She stuck the parchment to his back, spun her finger, and imprinted his status from his back. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he also turned around and faced a mirror in the corner of the room. The next moment, he saw the pattern on his back. His previously smooth back now had an engraving that resembled both a stone tablet and a crest. The engraving was roughly similar to Loki Familia's flag, both depicting the face of a clown. This was precisely the fauna that Riesel had received, proof that he had become a member of Loki Familia and the child of the goddess of mischief. All done. Loki also completed her work, writing down the imprinted status from Riesel's back on the parchment and happily handing it to him. Riesel took the parchment, his gaze fixed on it. Riesel Brynhart. Level 1. STR, I0. And, I0. Dex, I0. AGI, I0. Mag, I0. Magic. Almighty. Memorize magic. Activate specific magic based on memory. The strength of the magic is determined by the basic ability of mag. Only effective for valid magic. Skill. Fool's Obsession. Extraordinary increase in growth speed. Extraordinary increase in growth limit. The deeper the obsession, the stronger the effect. The effect is greatly enhanced in dangerous situations. Endless. Obtains the highest rank development ability Healing Power. Obtains the highest rank development ability Spirit Healing. Obtains the highest rank development ability Abnormal Resistance. Improve obtained development abilities. Self-Redemption. Immune to body interference. Immune to mental interference. The status can be updated independently by consuming the corresponding god's blood. Can accept and enhance the effects of friendly buffs on oneself. That was the content of the parchment and the true nature of the status depicted by Riesel. Originally portrayed as a clown, the sacred text, which was incomprehensible to ordinary people, had become a common language under Loki's imprint. As he looked at the content on the parchment, he muttered. A magic and 3 skills. Riesel unexpectedly awakened a magic and 3 skills from the start. Congrats, kid. Loki patted his shoulder, laughing more and more recklessly. No choice. Magic and skills that ordinary people may not possess even one of, and you awaken 4 just by receiving a blessing. Loki was so delighted. Because she really hit the jackpot. She picked up a massive treasure. Chapter 7, Tower of Babel. 1 magic and 3 skills for one who had just received a blessing was indeed an extravagant starting point. Even Loki, who brought her Familia from scratch to one of the strongest positions in Orario over the past few decades, had only seen such potential in a single individual's body. That individual was Findium, the first member of Loki Familia recruited after she descended to the lower world. He was the current captain of Loki Familia, and one of the less than 10 level 6 individuals in Orario, known as the Palom Hero Braver. Loki Familia's captain, much like Riesel, awakened 1 magic and 3 skills when he first received a blessing. Now, Finn possessed 2 magic and 5 skills, making him someone with the most skills within Loki's knowledge. Although the quantity of magic and skills didn't necessarily make someone stronger than those with fewer, there were undoubtedly stronger individuals than Finn in Orario. It all depended on the specific effects of the magic and skills. Magic and skills could vary in strength, with some being more useful than others. Awakening didn't guarantee increased strength, it depended on the specific effects. However, Loki couldn't help but be impressed as she examined the effects of Riesel's magic and skills on the parchment. Really, Loki muttered, looking at Riesel's ridiculous skills and magic, her eyes that rarely opened now glittering with bright light. Especially the effect of one of the skills called Self-Redemption. The status can be updated independently by consuming the corresponding god's blood. What a bullshit skill, Loki cursed quietly. Not to mention me, who's only been in the lower world for a few decades. Even those old folks who've been here for centuries probably haven't seen a skill with this kind of effect. Loki had never heard of any child in the lower world being able to update their status independently. What did this mean for the position of gods in this matter? How could they handle it? Little did Riesel know about Loki's mood, as he was busy examining his own status. There wasn't much to say about basic abilities. Due to just receiving the blessing, all 5 basic abilities were at the lowest I rank, with 0 proficiency. Proficiency, measured with numbers, indicates the level of progress of a basic ability. 0 to 99 is I. 100 to 199 is H. 200 to 299 is G. 300 to 399 is F. And so on. When proficiency upgraded to 900 to 999, it became S. The highest tier for basic abilities was generally considered to be S, with a proficiency limit of 999. To enhance proficiency in basic abilities and advance, the only method was to frequently use that ability. Want to improve STR? Use forceful attacks frequently. Want to enhance end? Endure attacks frequently. Want to boost AGI? Increase speed and move frequently. Want to enhance mag? Use magic frequently. And so on. As the ability was used more frequently, proficiency also increased. Only when it approached the highest value of 999 and the ability reached S rank did the growth in proficiency slow down. It was said that there were very few people who could upgrade their basic ability to the highest evaluation S rank, and even reaching A rank and B rank was quite rare. Of course, being someone familiar with the original work, Riesel knew that some people could easily surpass this theoretical upper limit. Yes, it was the main character from the original work. I wonder if I can break through this limit. While Riesel pondered such matters, most of his attention was focused on his own magic and skills. When he saw his unique magic named Almighty, his gaze paused slightly. Memorize magic? Hey! Riesel's heart self-deprecatingly remarked. In the end, my only strength is my memory. Clearly, this magic was a manifestation of his outstanding memory, also a representation of his innate skill worth boasting about from his previous life. Perhaps the reason it manifested in the form of magic was related to the fact that the original owner of his body was a native of a world with magic, naturally possessing strong magical energy. As for his 3 skills, they were completely crystallized from his heart's obsession. Riesel tentatively noted down the effects of these magic and skills, intending to explore them in the future. At this moment, Loki seemed to have organized her thoughts and spoke again. I will lock your status with my blood, hiding the status to prevent others from peering. Loki picked up the needle again, pricked her finger, and touched Riesel's back. Also, I'll remind you, status is the biggest secret of everyone blessed. Generally, except for the most trusted Familia members and the god of your Familia, you shouldn't disclose information about your status to anyone. This is to avoid your power being figured out by those with ill intentions, attracting unnecessary trouble. Loki's face turned serious for the first time, looking at Riesel with great sincerity. Especially you, Riesel. Apart from Familia members, you better not let anyone know about your magic and skills. There was no doubt that his magic and skills were abilities beyond the norm. Perhaps he still needed to explore, but as a goddess with broad knowledge and extraordinary insight, Loki could already see their capabilities and potential. It was something that would undoubtedly shock and even drive certain entities crazy. Therefore, she must remind him of this matter with seriousness. Got it. Riesel nodded. Naturally, he wouldn't casually reveal his status to outsiders. He knew that the things you could keep hidden were often the keys to victory and the aces up your sleeve. Good that you understand, kiddo. Loki finally relaxed but then grinned mischievously. Of course, you don't have to be overly cautious. Loki Familia isn't just any random group. If anyone dares to make a move on you without good reason, they better be ready to lose some hands. Loki, with blood on her fingertips, made a mark on Riesel's back. Ripples spread across his back like the surface of a disturbed pond. Before long, his status on the back vanished and was locked. Unless she used her blood to unlock it, or someone resorted to forbidden means, no one could reveal it. Riesel felt he could probably unlock it himself using Loki's blood, given his acquired skill. However, he had no intention of doing so. All set. Loki clapped her hands, looking triumphant and satisfied. Riesel, now dressed, burned the parchment with his status written on it by the lamp and then turned to Loki. When can I go to the dungeon? Riesel asked calmly. The hell? Are you in a hurry? Loki rolled her eyes. Just received a blessing, and you're already itching to dive into the dungeon? Aren't you tired, kiddo? According to Riesel's story, he had just arrived in Orario today. Though Loki didn't know where he came from, wanting to join Loki Familia on the first day, receiving a blessing, and immediately expressing a desire to enter the dungeon suggested remarkable energy. You better rest well first. Once you're settled, we can discuss other matters. I'll have someone take you to an empty room. Tomorrow, we can show you around the manor and introduce you to everyone. Loki said irritably while waving her hand. Now, go rest. Hearing this, Riesel unconsciously frowned but quickly relaxed. Can I take this with me? Riesel pointed to the short sword casually lying on Loki's bed. You fancy that? Loki looked strangely at him. Sure, take it. It's more of a decorative piece than a functional weapon. Its value as an artwork far exceeds its performance as a weapon. If you take it, it's just for self-defense, got it? That's enough for me. Riesel smiled slightly. I just want something for self-defense anyway. Walking around empty-handed feels a bit unsafe. Is that so? Loki squinted her eyes at him for a while, then waved her hand. Take it then. Consider it a gift for the newcomer. Thank you. Riesel bowed his head before picking up the short sword and soon left the divine room. I thought he was a steady kid. Turns out he's got an impatient side too, Loki muttered softly as she watched him leave. She then shook her head. Well, whatever. All the kids in this familia are like this, always carrying some heavy burden. I hope this kid can grow up smoothly. Inside the divine room, Loki, seemingly unreliable at first glance but with a mind both meticulous and far-sighted, quietly closed her eyes. Meanwhile, at the entrance of Twilight Manor, Riesel clutched a flamboyantly decorated short sword and departed. His gaze was fixed on the very center of the city. There stood a towering building, even taller than the central tower of Twilight Manor, soaring high enough to overlook the entire city, a colossal ivory tower. Is that Babel? The Tower of Babel was the most crucial and iconic structure in Orario. It served numerous functions and purposes. Among its various functions and purposes, the most vital was acting as the lid for the dungeon, suppressing the entrance of the dungeon beneath the tower. Yes. The entrance to the dungeon lay right beneath that ivory giant. Sorry, Loki. In Riesel's eyes, a glint of cold determination flickered. I don't have much time. He immediately headed in the direction of Babel. His goal was the dungeon. Chapter 8, Dungeon and Excitement. Long ago, there was a massive hole in the world. It was a colossal abyss capable of birthing endless monsters, a veritable dungeon of darkness. Countless heteromorphic creatures spewed forth from this hole, wreaking havoc across the surface, and leaving destruction in their wake. They swept through forests, mountains, valleys, oceans, and the sky, spreading chaos to every corner of the world. Mortals suffered greatly and were ruthlessly trampled upon. In their pursuit to regain dignity, restore peace, and avenge their fallen brethren, they transcended racial barriers. United, they set out to confront the monsters. After countless years of struggle, led and fueled by figures later known as heroes, mortals managed to drive the monsters back into the root of the abyss. Above this abyss, they erected a fortress. This fortress became known as the Labyrinth City Orario. The Great Hole was called the dungeon. The dungeon was a labyrinth. Inside, lay a world different from the surface. In this world, there were countless floors. No one knew the exact number. People only knew that each floor of the dungeon had a unique environment and terrain. The types of monsters varied, growing more complex and powerful as one descended deeper. Those with insufficient strength couldn't progress far, even on the first floor, considered the safest with the weakest monsters, where danger still lurked for an ordinary person. Even those blessed with abilities and possessing status needed courage and like-minded comrades to venture into the dungeon. During the daytime, adventurers who had received blessings from various familias gathered in the square in front of Babel. They registered with the guild, which managed Orario, to explore the labyrinth as their main duty. They formed parties, delving into the dungeon together, seeking immense wealth, fame, and prestige in this unknown territory. As for the night, it was uncommon for adventurers to enter the dungeon. However, on this pitch-black night, a figure entered Babel. Passing through the ornate doors of the first floor, along the steps bordering a massive hole, the figure entered the dungeon's first floor. The reckless figure had no proper armor or equipment, just casual clothes with zero protective equipment. Gripping a short sword, the figure ventured forth. A boundless silence pervaded. The figure, who was none other than Riesel, raised his eyes, gazing ahead, and saw a network of tunnels extending in all directions like underground passages. The walls and ceiling were a uniform light blue. Well-organized paths formed at intervals, featuring intersections, crossroads, gentle slopes, and other terrains. No other figures were around. At this moment, quite literally, Riesel stepped into a dungeon, an underground labyrinth. It feels a bit like back when I was surviving in the wilderness, accidentally stumbling into a bear's den. Riesel walked casually through the tunnel, his footsteps ringing clear in the silent surroundings. Krr. Krr. Whether drawn by his careless footsteps or not, faint roars hidden in the darkness began to emerge. Riesel's gaze shifted, his steps unyielding, eyes fixed straight ahead toward the end of the tunnel. There, at a fork in the path, pairs of crimson eyes glowed in the darkness. Monsters, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their prey to approach, silently appeared. It wasn't until he got closer that he could make out the appearance of the monster. It was a creature with a dog-like head and sharp claws and teeth. Kobold. With a breath that seemed almost like taking a breather, one kobold impatiently broke away from the group, stepping out of the darkness. Smaller than Riesel, uglier than a human, yet exuding a menacing aura, encountering a creature of fantasy for the first time was undoubtedly shocking for him. However, he didn't stop walking. Grey. As if it had found prey delivered to its doorstep, the kobold roared sharply and leaped at him. The vicious creature, constantly expanding in his pupils, approached relentlessly. Ha! Ba dump, ba dump, ba dump. Riesel, exhaling a breath, struggled to control his pounding heart. This feeling, it's been a while. A rare, natural smile appeared on his lips. Despite facing danger, he not only felt no fear but instead entered an inexplicable state of excitement. Recalling the first time he left home, leaving the sight of family, and seeking extreme adventures outside, his feelings were just like this, not anxious or uneasy but rather strangely excited. Perhaps it was the numbness that lasted too long. Perhaps it was the familiarity that lasted too long. Once oppressed and bound for too long, Riesel, like a rebound from the bottom, would suddenly change when faced with highly stimulating things. In this state of inexplicable excitement, his steps never slowed down as he watched the kobold pounce toward him. From walking to a brisk pace. From a brisk pace to a run. Then sprinting. With this unyielding charge, Riesel fearlessly rushed toward the unknown creature he had never encountered before. Grey. The kobold immediately revealed a fierce look in its eyes and thrust its sharp claws towards his head. In the next second, accompanied by a metal clashing sound, the kobold's claws landed on a fancily decorated short sword. As Riesel approached the kobold to the limit, he boldly raised the short sword, blocking the claw attack aimed at his head. Bang! The next moment, a muffled sound erupted. It was Riesel, who had blocked the kobold's attack, using his free hand to clench into a fist and deliver a punch to the menacing dog-like head. Grr! The kobold let out a howl of pain, its slender frame unable to withstand the impact of the punch, and it was thrown to the ground. Grr! Grr! Seeing their comrade's unsuccessful attack, knocked down by the prey they were expecting, the remaining kobolds hiding in the darkness couldn't sit still. They all rushed out, charging towards Riesel. Witnessing this, his heartbeat accelerated even more, and the excitement in his heart increased. He felt a surge of strength coursing through his entire body. This was the result of adrenaline being triggered. The scene before him reminded him of his survival experiences in the wilderness. There was a time when he was ambushed by a pack of wolves at night in the wilderness, and just like now, he was attacked by multiple fierce wolves. Recalling that moment, his body moved instinctively. Although Riesel had transmigrated from an ordinary world without any mysteries or extraordinary powers, having experienced wilderness survival and extreme sports, his original body was naturally not bad. Despite the original owner of his current body being an ignorant and incompetent person, as a farmer's child who had worked in the countryside, in terms of stamina and body, his current body was not lacking. This allowed Riesel to put to good use the combat techniques and self-defense knowledge he had learned for self-protection in his previous life. So, faced with the oncoming attack of several kobolds, he chose the most appropriate course of action. The kobold that was originally wailing on the ground realized it had been lifted. Riesel grabbed the leg of the fallen kobold and swung it forcefully, throwing it towards the approaching group of kobolds. Bang! Once again, a muffled sound echoed. In the kobolds' cries, the two in the front were hit by their flying comrade. The kobold group immediately fell into chaos. The front kobolds fell one after another. The rear kobolds stumbled over the fallen ones in front, momentarily losing their charge. At that moment, Riesel moved again. He initiated a charge, reaching the nearest kobold, taking advantage of its confusion, and during the chaos, the short sword in his hand suddenly rose, stabbing into its head. Grey. A piercing scream echoed as the kobold collapsed to the ground with blood splattering in all directions. A drop of blood tainted Riesel's face, shimmering against his cold, glittering eyes, making him resemble a heartless devil. Grr! The last kobold seemed infuriated, stepping on its fallen comrade one by one and charging toward Riesel in rage. In response, Riesel seized the lifeless kobold from the ground, hoisting its slender body as if it were a hammer. He swung it fiercely, creating a howling sound as he sent the approaching kobold flying. The short sword in his hand saw little use, only employed by him to parry the claws and fangs of the kobolds. Otherwise, he wielded it for a lethal strike, thrusting the sharp sword edge into the vital points of his enemies. The duration of this battle seemed indefinite. Pucci. Before long, Riesel thrust his short sword into the chest of the last kobold, piercing its heart. With the fall of the final kobold, the battle concluded. The dungeon once again returned to silence. Standing amidst the corpses of kobolds, surrounded by blood and monster remnants, Riesel glanced at his blood-soaked hands and sword. The crimson stain on his cheek stood out vividly. Not enough, Riesel murmured suddenly. It's not enough. Ba dump, ba dump, ba dump. His heart continued to race. The pulsating blood refused to calm. A surge of intense emotion filled his chest as if he had expelled all the depression accumulated from past constraints. It can be even more intense, Riesel muttered words from the depths of his being. Following the whispers within, he discarded his refined demeanor, transforming into a berserker chasing after something unseen as he took a step deeper into the dungeon. Chapter 9, One Day One Night. Meanwhile, in Twilight Manor. In the Divine Room, Loki paced restlessly. Why hasn't he returned yet? Watching the sky outside gradually darken, her irritation became more apparent. He went out last night, and it's been a whole day today. It's been 1 day and 1 night, right? Recalling Riesel's cold and resolute figure as he left the room last night, Loki couldn't help but bite her nails. Did something happen? Seriously? Just 1 day into joining the Familia, and the treasure she just got was gone like that? If I had known, I wouldn't have indulged him. Loki regretted. She knew Riesel was likely to have gone into the dungeon. Originally, as a rookie who had just received a blessing, with abilities not much different from an ordinary person, she should have stopped him when she figured out his intention. But because his potential was too promising, despite just receiving the blessing and having basic abilities no different from an ordinary person, with 1 magic and 3 skills, coupled with his consistently calm and composed demeanor, seeming so tactful, she ultimately chose not to intervene and indulged the newcomer once. Little did she know that this indulgence would lead to a major incident. Come to think of it, even if that kid is tactful and has high potential, entering the dungeon rashly as a newcomer is a risky business. Leaving aside other considerations, such as the dungeon's information, Riesel didn't know much. For instance, the map of each floor of the dungeon or the abilities and types of monsters generated on each floor. As a rookie adventurer, he should have gathered all this information before entering the dungeon. However, Riesel completely neglected such preparations. Wasn't it highly probable that he would encounter unforeseen circumstances? Could he have been injured due to not understanding the monster's attack patterns? Or maybe he got lost due to not understanding the terrain? Or did he encounter an anomaly or a monster feast? But those situations hardly occur on the first few floors, right? Loki couldn't help but let her thoughts wander. No, I need to find help. In the end, she couldn't sit still, leaving the Divine Room and heading outside. Just as she was about to send someone to the dungeon to search for Riesel, someone shouted. That rookie is back. At the entrance of Twilight Manor, the Familia member in charge of guarding called out. Back. Loki's eyes lit up, and without thinking, she rushed towards the manor entrance gate. However, when she reached the entrance, the scene that met her eyes left her speechless. Hey, rookie, are you really okay? You don't look fine at all like this. Here, take this water, and this is a potion, drink up quickly. What the hell did you do to end up like this? Several members of Loki Familia gathered at the gate one after another, panicking and discussing in a fluster while constantly asking Riesel about his well-being and handing him various items. Thanks for the concern. I'm really okay. Riesel thanked the seniors from the Familia, his tone was calm as ever, but his body's condition was quite poor. His clothes were tattered, covered in various bloodstains that had turned black, making it hard to tell if it was his or the monster's. His black hair was messy and wet, giving him a disheveled appearance that was as bad as it could get. In his hands was a short sword, stained with fresh blood with its blade curled. Such an image was genuinely shocking. You. Loki stepped forward, wanting to scold him but held back. Follow me. Loki, with an unfriendly expression, didn't care about the intimidated Familia members around, dragging Riesel away without hesitation. He didn't resist, letting her lead him to the top floor of the central tower, and entering her room. Without waiting for Loki to say anything, Riesel took the initiative to speak. "Sorry for worrying you." He lowered his head and apologized to her. This left Loki speechless, unable to say anything at all. She could only take a deep breath, staring at him with an unchanged unfriendly expression. "I won't ask what you've been through. I'll just ask, were you in the dungeon all day and night?" "Yes." Riesel nodded with his eyes downcast. "And you stayed in the dungeon in this condition for a day and night?" Loki's mouth twitched. "On the first floor." No. Riesel stayed silent for a while and then calmly said, "If my memory serves me right, I should have walked through the passage to the next floor 4 times. At these words, for a split second, Loki was stunned. "Walked through the passage to the next floor 4 times? You go down to the 5th floor?" Loki asked with astonishment, and all she got was his silence. She rubbed her forehead tiredly. "You've just received a blessing for less than a day, haven't even registered as an adventurer in the guild, and you went down to the 5th floor, alone? Are you fucking kidding me?" Loki was on the verge of fainting. This was ridiculous. Just after receiving a blessing, rookie adventurers, even in a 3-person party, usually only explore the 1st floor for their first time in the dungeon, assuming nothing unexpected happens. As rookies, their abilities were still immature and unremarkable. In such circumstances, simply overcoming the fear and timidity of entering the dungeon already took considerable effort, not to mention fighting monsters and exploring the labyrinth. So, rookies usually need a significant amount of time to adapt before considering going to lower floors. Even in such cases, a rookie party would typically only explore the first 4 floors and never venture into the 5th floor. In fact, seniors in the Familia would absolutely prevent any rookie from entering the 5th floor. The reason was straightforward. Starting from the 5th floor of the dungeon, not only did the variety of monsters increase and become stronger, but even the structure of the dungeon became more complex. Not to mention the significant rise in the frequency of monster appearances, but starting from the 5th floor, the dungeon underwent a complete transformation. Its size alone surpassed the central square of Orario, and the difficulty of exploration suddenly reached another level. For rookie adventurers without guidance or prior knowledge of the conditions on the 5th floor and the types of monsters that appeared there, it wasn't surprising if they met their end on this floor. Given this, the 5th floor was considered the first significant death line in the dungeon. Compared to the first 4 floors, it undoubtedly became much more dangerous. And yet, Riesel, on his first dungeon delve, decided to charge into the 5th floor alone? Without any armor on his body and his status not having experienced any growth, in a state where his basic abilities were no different from an average person? It was as if he were asking to die. "I really want to know how you've managed to survive until now, kiddo," Loki said while looking at Riesel with a furious expression. Seeing this, Riesel didn't offer any defense, he only expressed his confusion. "To be honest, I'm also curious. I initially planned to return after pushing myself to exhaustion, but for some reason, my stamina seems inexhaustible, and my mind remains sharp. Before I knew it, I had spent a whole day and night in the dungeon." That was the truth. Riesel had indeed intended to return once he felt exhausted. Even though he was caught up in extreme excitement, enjoying the thrill of battle and unwilling to stop, he wasn't foolish. When he reached his limits, he would naturally calm down and retreat. The problem lay here. He didn't feel exhausted at all. The energy of body and mind seemed genuinely endless. No matter how much he fought, killed, ran, or explored, he just didn't feel tired. As a result, he couldn't gauge the time and extent of his retreat properly. Under the domination of his heightened emotions, he unintentionally pushed all the way to the 5th floor. If his stomach hadn't suddenly growled and felt hungry, he wouldn't have realized he had been in the dungeon for so long. "This must be because of your development abilities." Loki could only speak with a hint of irritation. Her words made Riesel pause for a moment. "Development abilities?" Riesel furrowed his brow. "Yeah, the ones I mentioned to you yesterday. They're additional abilities you have a chance of gaining only when you level up," Loki explained with a less than pleasant tone. Despite her tone, Riesel knew what development abilities were. As Loki described, they were acquired with a certain probability during leveling up, distinct from the basic abilities of STR, and Dex, AGI, and Mag. They were special abilities, an extension of basic abilities, introducing extra personal attributes. Unlike basic abilities, development abilities were only divided into S, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I ranks but lacked proficiency. Improving them was extremely difficult, but they offered passive benefits. For example, in this world, a blacksmith who received a blessing and leveled up to level 2 had a chance to gain a development ability called blacksmith. Holding this ability allowed them to add special attributes to the equipment they forged, creating advanced equipment akin to magical equipment. There were many such development abilities, including some useful ones for combat. Riesel's skill called Endless, granted him 3 development abilities. The effect of healing power is the automatic restoration of stamina. Even without taking a break, you can rapidly recover while fighting. The effect of spirit healing is the automatic restoration of mind. You can get recovery during battles without the need for deep rest. The effect of abnormal resistance is the ability to resist abnormal status, such as poisoning. Loki explained the effects of each development ability and sighed wearily. The reason you can spend a day and night in the dungeon without feeling tired is because of those development abilities. Chapter 10, Fool's Obsession. The reason you can spend a day and night in the dungeon without feeling tired is because of those development abilities. Loki's words made Riesel raise his hands and look at them. His hands were still stained with blood, mud, and dust, visibly in a sorry state. Yet, these hands had fought relentlessly for a whole day and night. Endless, the benefits brought by this skill seemed much greater than he had imagined. Only by leveling up do you have a certain chance of gaining development abilities. In other words, those who possess development abilities should be at least level 2. Loki glanced at Riesel from the corner of her eye. Thanks to the skill, you acquired 3 development abilities, all of the highest rank at that. How could that not be a significant advantage? Whether it was healing power, spirit healing, or abnormal resistance, as development abilities resembling basic abilities, even without proficiency to indicate the progress, they still had different ranks. From the lowest I rank to the highest S rank, there were 10 ranks for both development and basic abilities. The effect of Endless allowed Riesel to gain 3 development abilities, all at the highest rank. What did that mean? It meant that, due to the skill's effect, all 3 development abilities he obtained were S rank. This was quite extraordinary. I can't speak for other familias, but in ours, no member's development abilities have upgraded beyond D rank, with the highest being E rank. Loki revealed this secret. But you, right from the start, have 3 equivalent to S rank development abilities. Even when you acquire more development abilities later, your skill's effect will upgrade the ranks of those development abilities. That's just ridiculous, you know. That highlighted how ridiculous and powerful Riesel's endless effect was. After all, Loki Familia was not an ordinary Familia, it was one of the strongest in Orario. With the dungeon, a mysterious realm with countless monsters to conquer and challenges aplenty, rising to the top here was equivalent to being at the pinnacle worldwide. Orario was rightfully called the center of the world. In Loki Familia, experts abounded, including several influential figures at the top. Compared to the ancient heroes who once drove monsters back into the dungeon, reclaiming the land for mortals, Loki Familia wasn't far behind. Even among such experts, none had development abilities upgraded beyond E rank. Did this not further emphasize the extraordinary nature of Riesel's skill? If it were just the recently acquired version healing power and spirit healing, the effects wouldn't be as astonishing as making someone tirelessly fight for a whole day and night without feeling tired. However, when both healing power and spirit healing were of the highest rank, it was an entirely different story. Now, you've just experienced the effects of healing power and spirit healing. But when you descend a few more floors and encounter monsters that can inflict abnormal statuses, you'll realize that your abnormal resistance is equally insane, Loki said with a sigh, and her mood improved somewhat. Holding the highest rank abnormal resistance, I reckon unless it's a deadly poison that can kill even gods, there's probably no abnormal status in this world that can affect you. At this point, Loki couldn't help but think of another one of Riesel's skills, self-redemption. Setting aside the status's independent update effect that could make any god curse, the other 2 effects were equally insane. Being immune to body interference meant that no one could tamper with his body, whether it was manipulating him with magic or trying to fool his perception. Even she, as the goddess of the Familia herself, attempting to do something unfavorable with his blessing wouldn't work. Being immune to mental interference meant that methods targeting memory and soul became ineffective, including charm and confusion. The combination of these 2 effects, paired with the highest rank abnormal resistance ability, was practically unbeatable. At least, Loki thought that defeating Riesel with these 2 skills would be challenging, aside from relying on brute strength for victory. However, the third effect of this skill made friendly buff effects that were originally unable to interfere with his body, mind, or energy suddenly effective. It was outrageous. Yet, despite these two powerful skills, Loki believed that compared to Riesel's first skill, their effects and importance might have to take a back seat. Thinking about the effects of that skill and recalling his relentless one-day and one-night struggle, Loki's squinted eyes suddenly widened a bit. She remained silent for a while and then shifted her gaze to his body. "Take off your shirt," Loki suddenly said. "What?" Riesel, still lost in his thoughts, was momentarily puzzled. Seeing this, Loki grinned. "I'm curious how much you've grown after this one day and one night," Loki said, one word at a time. "Let's update your status." At her words, Riesel's calm and composed eyes glittered with a peculiar light. Updating status. This was what everyone who received the blessing looked forward to the most. After going through adventurous exploits, engaging in various activities, and accumulating excelia, a simple update of status transformed these excelia into substantial nourishment, fostering growth and making individuals stronger. In this process, not only did basic abilities get a boost, but those who had experienced profound events might have also awakened magic and skills. They might have even gained new magic and skills, significantly enhancing their strength. Especially for those who had never possessed magic and skills, every status update was eagerly anticipated, hoping that magic and skills would manifest after the update. Compared to those people, Riesel was undeniably fortunate. He had just received a blessing, and one magic had appeared right away. He had even gained 3 skills in one go, truly blessed by heaven. For ordinary people, unless they were exceptionally talented geniuses, it was normal not to have a single magic or skill when first receiving a blessing. They eagerly anticipated the emergence of magic and skills, craving extraordinary mysteries and exceptional power. This could be said to be the process that the majority of those blessed went through. While Riesel wasn't as desperate, his expectations were definitely not far behind those people. Because, excluding magic and skills, his basic abilities had never undergone growth or improvement. Whether it was physique or combat prowess, he still belonged to the category of ordinary. In other words, he had yet to experience the so-called extraordinary power. Considering this, for his first status update, he was filled with anticipation. Without delay, Loki faced Riesel's back, who had taken off his shirt, and began the status update. The specific steps were similar to when he was blessed, initially taking out a needle, piercing the fingertip, using her blood to touch his back, skillfully moving fingers to draw a blood-red trail on his back. First, Loki unlocked Riesel's status, causing the previously blank back to quickly display crimson inscriptions as if they were runes. Shortly afterward, she squeezed out a drop of her blood, letting it fall on his back, creating circular ripples that spread throughout the entire inscription. From this point on, the replacement of status took place. The accumulated excelia was extracted by the hand of God, serving as material and changing into the foundation for growth. The new sacred text replaced the old one, engraved into his back. As this process continued, at a certain moment, Loki's eyes widened once again. After a long while, she showed an expression that Riesel couldn't tell if it was crying or laughing. "Fuck!" the goddess suddenly swore, startling him. "What happened?" Riesel turned around, looking at Loki with a bewildered expression. "See for yourself." Loki, with a world-view-shattering expression, numbly translated his status onto the parchment, converting it into the common language, and tossed it to him. Riesel took the parchment and saw his latest status. Riesel Brynhart. Level 1. STR, I0H184. And, I0H177. Dex, I0G202. AGI, I0G215. Mag, I0. Magic and skill weren't imprinted or translated, probably due to their unchanging nature. However, in the basic abilities section, Riesel underwent significant changes. STR and END broke through the I rank one after another, entering the H rank. Dex and AGI even directly skipped over the H rank, entering the G rank. Mag remained unchanged, likely because he didn't use magic. After one day and one night of intense battle, the ultimate result was a comprehensive increase of over 700 in his basic abilities proficiency. What a ridiculous growth speed! Loki exclaimed with shock inwardly. I always knew that fool's obsession had to be the most broken skill. Her mind went crazy. No choice. As the goddess of a big familia, Loki had updated statuses for many members and even handled characters considered geniuses. Considering her well-informed nature, she was well aware of the typical growth rate for rookies who had just received blessings. In just a day and night, even the geniuses within Loki Familia initially could only increase proficiency by about a few dozen points at a time. But a total ability proficiency increase of over 700, nearly 800? Loki stared with her divine eyes, fixedly observing the skill on Riesel's back with an unbelievable gaze. Fool's obsession. Extraordinary increase in growth speed. Extraordinary increase in growth limit. The deeper the obsession, the stronger the effect. The effect is greatly enhanced in dangerous situations. No doubt, Riesel's extraordinary growth can be attributed to this skill. Loki had never witnessed such a ridiculous effect before. It wasn't about boosting strength or providing assistance, it was a unique skill that proved to be beneficial for growth. Now, Orario gonna see some changes. Loki thought with excitement as she saw her new child. Chapter 11, Become Adventurer. Next day, early morning. The sun had just started to brighten, but Riesel was already awake. Taking a quick look around the somewhat unfamiliar room, he was confused for a moment before aware of his situation. Almost forgot, I've moved into Twilight Manor. This was one of the many towers within Twilight Manor, located on the upper floor in one of its rooms. Yesterday, after completing the status update at Loki's room, Riesel was assigned to this room. This was his room in Twilight Manor, the residence in Loki Familia's main base. From now on, barring any unexpected events, this place would be his, free for him to use. Getting out of bed, he first glanced outside the dimly lit window before starting to freshen up. After finishing his morning routine, he noticed a set of clothes placed outside his room, seemingly left there by some members of the Familia. Goddess told me to prepare these for you. Staring at the clothes with a note on top, Riesel fell silent for a moment, then silently thanked them in his mind before changing into the new clothes. As for his own clothes, there was no way he would wear them again. The set, covered in bloodstains, mud and dust after a day and night of battle, had gloriously declared its demise. It couldn't be repaired, only discarded. In the awkward situation of having no replacement, he had to accept the kindness of the Familia. However, it seemed the Familia's goodwill wasn't limited to just a set of clothes, there was also a heavy bag filled with shining coins. Inside the bag, there was another note. There's a total of 100,000 valis in here, consider it your startup funds. Use it wisely. If you don't follow my instructions from last night, you're not allowed to enter the dungeon. No need to guess, this note was almost certainly left by Loki. This reminded Riesel of the tasks assigned by her after updating his status last night. A wry smile suddenly appeared on his face. It seems that without completing those preparations, she won't allow me back into the dungeon. Well, that's fine. Since it was for his own benefit, Riesel would obediently follow Loki's arrangements. Taking the somewhat heavy money bag, he pondered for a moment. In the end, he chose not to carry it on his person but instead placed it in the storage space of the Dimensional Magic Cube. In the third instruction of the Dimensional Magic Cube's instructions it was mentioned that the Dimensional Magic Cube came with a storage space that could be opened and used at any time. Even before arriving in this world, while lying in bed recovering from injuries in his original world, he had already tried opening the storage space of the Dimensional Magic Cube. Therefore, he was not unfamiliar with this function. Collect. With a silent recitation in his heart, the money pouch in his hand disappeared. It had entered the storage space contained within the Dimensional Magic Cube. The method for the storage space to receive an item was straightforward: touch the belongings, silently say collect. The process was the same for extracting an item. First, immerse consciousness into the Dimensional Magic Cube storage space, observe the interior, locate the desired item, and then silently say extract. Once familiar with these functions during the month of recuperation, he could now perform collect or extract in less than a second. It was convenient and efficient. After he was done, Riesel opened the door and stepped into a corridor. Upon closer inspection, this corridor was suspended. As the base of Loki Familia, the various towers that made up Twilight Manor were interconnected. The lower halves of several spires were linked, while the upper halves extended into stone corridors connecting the towers. From the outside, it looked like a complex network of passages between the towers, lacking any semblance of order. Riesel walked on one such aerial corridor, which offered a view of the courtyard below. Morning! Morning, rookie! Several early rising Familia members seemed busy with tasks. They greeted Riesel as they passed by. Morning! Riesel returned the greetings politely and continued down the corridor, eventually leaving Twilight Manor. He crossed the courtyard and arrived at the main gate. "Morning, rookie. Heading out so early? Don't come back like last night, all worn out, okay?" The two Familia members at the gate recognized Riesel. One greeted him while the other gave a friendly warning. "I won't, please be relieved, seniors." Feeling a bit awkward, Riesel could only smile politely before continuing on his way. It wasn't until he walked onto the main street that he felt the gazes behind him fade. They are quite friendly and genuinely caring too. Riesel sighed slightly, feeling inexplicably moved. In his previous life, the people around him were mostly manipulative and hypocritical, smiling at him with hidden agendas. It was rare for anyone to genuinely care and show consideration as the members of the Loki Familia did. So, he found it quite foreign. Even the incident last night, where Loki gave him a cold shoulder for being out one day and one night, was something he wasn't used to. Therefore, he was quieter than usual. However, he knew it was because these people genuinely cared about him, making him feel awkward. It was a rare experience for him, so feeling awkward was natural. Fortunately, after spending a month healing in the main world, Yuri's attitude towards him wasn't bad either. Otherwise, he might truly have felt overwhelmed and unsure. Overall, the atmosphere within Loki Familia made Riesel quite comfy. Even though I already had some understanding of Loki Familia through the original work, when I originally chose to join Loki Familia, it wasn't without considering the friendly atmosphere within the Familia. But after experiencing it firsthand, it just felt different. Riesel could only express his feelings in this way before shaking his head, trying to clear his thoughts. However, his mood inevitably improved quite a bit, causing his steps to be more forceful than usual. Deep down, he silently noted everyone's help and concern and made a promise to repay them when the opportunity arose. That's just how he is impressed and highly appreciative of people's kindness and goodwill. Perhaps it's because he rarely encountered people with purely good intentions towards him in the past? As he thought about his previous life, Riesel couldn't help but mock himself slightly. Whatever, let's not dwell on it too much. Since he had already decided to leave his past behind, thinking about those things would only add unnecessary worries. He quickly shifted his thoughts and began focusing on the tasks at hand. There's a lot to do today. Last night, Loki gave him several strict orders that he must complete. First, I need to prepare a new weapon and a set of armor suitable for dungeon exploration. Second, finish reading the books I found in the library last night, memorizing information about the dungeon's upper levels, maps, and details about the monsters on each floor. Lastly, visit the guild and register as an adventurer. These were the 3 instructions Loki gave Riesel to complete. Only after finishing these tasks could he enter the dungeon again. It's more accurate to say that, typically, people who want to enter the dungeon would complete these preparations first before considering venturing in. Riesel, on the other hand, disrupted common sense, entering the dungeon first and then turning back to make these preparations, truly leaving people dumbfounded. If it weren't for him awakening 1 magic and 3 skills with astonishing effects, and the update of his status last night almost driving Loki insane, she might have ordered him to find a party and not allow him to venture into the dungeon alone. At that moment, Loki was being quite lenient, only instructing him to make these 3 preparations. As for the books, I pretty much finished reading them last night. At least, I've memorized the information about the first few floors of the dungeon. Riesel, with his exceptional memory, wasn't troubled by that at all and had already completed that task last night. With 2 tasks left, register at the guild and use the startup funds to purchase weapons and armor. Let's go register at the guild first. Having made this decision, Riesel recalled the city map he noted down last night and headed northwest. The street here was bustling early in the morning, with many shops open and stalls set up on both sides. On the way, many people, humans, and various demi-humans were walking around, some well equipped, indicating that they weren't to be messed with. Entering this street and walking deeper, Riesel, along with many others with the same destination, eventually arrived at a magnificent building. It was a building constructed with white pillars. In the spacious marble-made entrance hall, numerous heavily armed individuals were bustling around, crowding the area to the point of chaos. This was the guild, the official organization managing the labyrinth city, Orario. Most of the figures present were adventurers, people with the duty and purpose of conquering dungeons. Riesel managed to slip in and approached the counter. "Hey there, could you help me register as an adventurer?" Riesel spoke to the lady receptionist behind the counter. "Sure, Just a moment. The receptionist responded promptly. She skillfully pulled out a piece of parchment and began the registration process. Name: Riesel Brinhart. Race: human. Age: 17. Riesel initially thought about stating his age from his previous life, but it felt a bit awkward to report that age with the appearance of his current body. Therefore, he hesitated slightly before giving the age of his current body. To which familia do you belong? Unaware of his complex mood, the receptionist continued with the questions. Loki Familia. Riesel didn't hesitate much and stated it directly. However, in that split second, a brief silence fell over the entire hall. Chapter 12, Getting Stronger. What happened? Is something wrong? The sudden brief silence seemed to not affect Riesel as he calmly asked the lady receptionist, who stared blankly at him. No, nothing wrong. The receptionist realized what she had done, hastily apologized, and continued filling out the registration form for him. However, whether it was his misconception or not, the receptionist's hands seemed faster than before, accelerating the registration process. The surrounding silence was once again filled with noise as if nothing had happened. Yet, if one listened closely, there were still many people discussing one after another. Is he really from Loki Familia? Just registered as an adventurer? A rookie, right? Loki Familia added another rookie. It's probably not a simple guy. Human, hey? Seems to lack good racial skills compared to other races. Could he be someone with outstanding personal skills? Who knows? The discussions continued endlessly, and some of it reached Riesel's ears. However, he paid them no heed. After all, it wasn't something particularly strange. As one of the strongest familias in Orario, Loki Familia was destined to be a focus of attention wherever they went. Since he had declared his affiliation with Loki Familia, it was normal for people around to discuss it. Moreover, he felt that his presence might soon catch the eye of observant and conscientious individuals through various channels. The addition of a rookie to Loki Familia might not be a big deal, but for those closely monitoring Loki Familia's movements, it was worth gathering information. Of course, they could only gather the information that Loki Familia had a new rookie named Riesel Brinhart and nothing more. As for specific information about him, it wasn't so easy for those people to find out. Not long after completing the procedures, Riesel left the guild and returned to the street. Instead of leaving directly, he wandered around on the street. This street, located in the northwest direction of Orario, known as Northwest Street, was mainly frequented by adventurers due to its proximity to the guild headquarters that managed the city and adventurers. Thanks to this, Northwest Street seized the opportunity and opened numerous shops catering to adventurers. There were shops specializing in weapons and armor equipment, shops selling potions and special items, and many more. Such establishments were abundant on Northwest Street, to the point where the street had earned the nickname Adventurers Street. Following Loki's instructions, Riesel needed to purchase weapons and armor, so there was no reason for him to leave directly. 100,000 Valis. As Riesel strolled down the street, he weighed the amount of startup capital he had. In Orario, 100,000 Valis might not be chump change, but it's not exactly a fortune either. Here, a serving of fried noodles costs a few hundred Valis, and a regular drink rarely exceeds 1,000 Valis in value. Determining whether this purchasing power was significant or trivial was a bit of a delicate matter. A bottle of ordinary potion for stamina recovery is worth around 1,000 Valis. A basic, cheap standard short sword is valued at a few thousand Valis. When you calculate it like that, 100,000 Valis does seem like a decent sum. However, Riesel knew that for truly powerful adventurers, 100,000 Valis might be no more than pocket change. Without delving into specifics, the equipment wielded by top-tier adventurers typically didn't fall below 1 million Valis, often surpassing 10 million Valis. For instance, weapons ranged from a few thousand Valis for standard ones to tens of millions or even over 100 million Valis for top-notch ones. Due to the ability of mortals to receive blessings and level up, there was a chance to obtain blacksmith development abilities. Depending on the blacksmith skill and the level of the blacksmith ability, the crafted equipment varied in strength. Generally, people classify special equipment into first-class equipment, second-class equipment, and third-class equipment based on these levels. Only top-tier blacksmiths with the blacksmith ability could craft equipment that fell into these graded categories, especially the magical ones with special effects. In other words, even though Riesel had a startup capital of 100,000 Valis, he might not have been able to afford a single piece of the lowest level third-class equipment, let alone gather weapons and armor. It seems like I won't be able to afford special equipment for now. Riesel felt a bit disappointed. Of course, it was only a slight disappointment. It wasn't strange for a level 1 rookie to be incapable of affording special equipment. Even level 2 adventurers would generally find it challenging to afford special equipment. The use of special equipment was concentrated, around 90%, among adventurers at level 3 and above. Riesel thought he would have to wait a while before he could use special equipment with levels and effective effects. I'll just buy some higher quality ordinary products then. Having accepted this reality, Riesel began browsing through the storefronts along the street. 2 hours later, he successfully gathered the equipment he needed. Firstly, he spent 24,000 valis on a sword. The sword was the kind that could be used with one hand, slender and lightweight, with relatively weak attack power but fast in speed, agility, and easy handling. It was the weapon Riesel found most suitable for himself after considering various options. From the growth trends in his status, it was evident that his dex and AGI had developed more, while STR and End were relatively less. This indicated that he leaned towards a faster, more skill-oriented fighting style. Therefore, he chose a lightweight and slender sword as his main weapon, aiming to maximize his proficiency in speed and skill. Besides the slender sword, he spent 11,000 valis on a short sword as a backup weapon, just in case. As for armor, since heavy armor would hinder his movements and affect his speed and skill, he ultimately decided against high defense metal armor. Instead, he opted for leather body armor. This leather armor consisted of an inner layer protecting the upper body, armor for vital joints such as elbows and knees, while gloves and boots emphasized protection for hands and feet. Whether it was the body protecting inner layer or the joint protecting armor, both were lightweight and could be worn under clothes, making them convenient protective gear. Since they added almost no weight when worn on the body and didn't hinder movement, Riesel was immediately drawn to them and decided to put on this set of armor, especially the gloves and boots, which he knew from his earlier battle in the dungeon were highly practical. It was all because he didn't bother with proper protection for his hands and feet yesterday. After a day of intense fighting, the hands that gripped the sword were literally worn down to the skin, and the fists pounding on the monster's body had some unknown injuries, bleeding who knows how much. The same went for his feet. Running around in a dungeon with regular shoes meant his feet ended up with skin scraped off in just a fraction of a minute. If it weren't for the Familia's senior providing him with a potion to quickly heal his injuries when he returned to the Familia yesterday, Riesel wouldn't be bouncing around like this today. Adding the injuries from the intense battle that lasted 1 day and 1 night, it can only be said that, thankfully, the remarkably effective potion saved him. Otherwise, Loki, who saw his sorry state yesterday, wouldn't have let him off easily. The whole set of armor alone cost Riesel a whopping 48,000 valis. With the expenses for the main and sub-weapons, he spent a total of 83,000 valis, leaving him with only 17,000 valis from the initial 100,000 valis. This level of spending, this kind of pricey equipment, said with no trace of politeness, was definitely beyond the reach of a newly debuted level 1. Even the seasoned low-class adventurers among level 1, with all their equipment combined, probably wouldn't surpass 30,000 valis. They pale in comparison to the quality of his equipment. His equipment was already at the level of level 2 adventurers. Is this good enough? After preparing the equipment, Riesel finally couldn't hold back and headed to Babel, entering the dungeon. He couldn't wait. Eager to test his new weapons and assess his current strength. And the results were naturally pleasing. Grr. When the kobold, like an unyielding ferocious beast, lunged at Riesel as usual, he boldly charged forward incredibly fast. Puchi. A silver arc tore through the atmosphere, cutting through the kobold's head as it pounced. The kobold even maintained its pouncing posture in midair, unable to react at all, and its head was severed by the slender sword. Blood sprayed, dyeing the ground red and the corpse of the kobold in the bloody pool. So easy. Standing in front of the corpse, Riesel looked at his hands in amazement. My speed has become so fast, and I feel much stronger than yesterday. Just by enhancing basic abilities by 1 and 2 ranks, can there be such a significant change? This surprised and excited him. I am indeed getting stronger. After realizing this, he no longer felt just excitement but also a surge of determination for the efforts he had made so far. It's just a bit unfortunate that after getting stronger, enemies at this level probably won't excite me anymore. Riesel greedily eyed the corpse at his feet, his expression turning regretful. He still preferred challenges that were a bit more thrilling. Chapter 13, Almighty. The improvement in strength seemed to make it impossible for Riesel to engage in tense and thrilling battles with monsters as he did yesterday, leaving him without the excitement he felt before. He moved forward, even descending through several floors, engaging in battles with monsters. Whether it was kobolds or goblins, renowned among the small fry, no matter how many gathered or what kind of attack they launched, he effortlessly dealt with them. Not a single monster could react to his movements. Not a single monster could withstand his strikes. All Riesel needed to do was charge, swing his sword, and he could instantly kill any monster, easily breaking through their encirclement and wiping them out. This gradually left him feeling dissatisfied. Just because my basic abilities have grown by 1 and 2 ranks, the monsters on the upper floors are completely insufficient to challenge me. Ignoring the monsters fallen all around, Riesel frowned deeply. At this point, he had descended to the 4th floor and reached the entrance to the 5th floor. It seems like I need to continue pushing forward. Staring at the entrance to the 5th floor, which resembled a cave opening, his eyes flickered. According to the records in the book and the experiences of the guild and familias, adventurers at my level are generally considered capable of exploring floors 5 to 7, right? Level 1 adventurers could conquer floors between the 1st and 12th. From the 13th floor, level 2 monsters appear, and the dungeon environment and monster output efficiency undergo a significant change. Floors starting from the 13th were considered forbidden zones for level 1 adventurers. The difficulty of conquering floors between the 1st and 12th was outlined by guilds and familias. For example, the 1st to 4th floors were areas that adventurers with basic abilities between I and H could conquer. The 5th to 7th floors were for adventurers with basic abilities between G and F, and so on. My Dex and AGI are both at G rank. According to the standards, the 5th floor should be relatively safe for exploration. Unlike last night, when he reached the 5th floor and faced numerous life-threatening situations, Riesel should be able to safely conquer the floor now. But a safe conquest. Riesel murmured, then made a decision. Let's go to deeper floors. Exactly. He didn't need a safe conquest. If safety was the priority, he wouldn't have ventured into the dungeon alone without wearing any armor, wielding a mere decorative short sword, and challenging the dungeon right after receiving a blessing. At that time, he didn't even reach G rank, he didn't have any abilities at H rank. His status proficiency was 0, and his physical qualities were no different from an ordinary person. In such circumstances, he dared to enter the dungeon alone, even reaching the 5th floor. Now that he had grown, why would he settle for the so-called safe conquest on the same floor? Of course, such a decision was bound to be dangerous. But so what? Death isn't terrifying. What's terrifying is waiting for it. At least, that was how Riesel saw it. If he was destined to die, he'd rather it be on a path he chose, chasing freedom until he was worn out, rather than waiting for someone else to plot his murder, like in the main world. So, he was running. Running towards higher ground. Sprinting towards bigger challenges. Let's go. Without hesitation, Riesel charged towards the entrance of the 5th floor. It was night. When the day had completely darkened, Riesel finally escaped the dungeon and returned to Twilight Manor. This time, he managed to restrain himself and didn't spend another day and night inside the dungeon. After dark, he had to go back to Orario and return to the manor, which was a strict order from Loki to him. Given this, although somewhat reluctant, Riesel still followed her command and left the dungeon after dark. Back at Twilight Manor, he cleaned himself up, changed into a set of clean clothes, and once again entered Loki's divine room. The purpose, of course, was to update his status. Perhaps because Riesel had been obedient, Loki, who was drinking in the room at that time, filled with the scent of alcohol, seemed quite pleased and readily agreed. Riesel Brynhart. Level 1. STR, H184F385. And, H177F380. Dex, G202E431. AGI, G215E449. Mag, I0. Looking at the ridiculous growth status etched on Riesel's back after the updates, Loki's mouth twitched repeatedly. An overall ability proficiency increase of over 800. Isn't this even more significant than yesterday's growth? Loki felt her head buzzing. What on earth was happening? What in the world was going on? The growth in status, especially as it approached S rank, shouldn't slow down? But this kid not only didn't slow down, he became even faster. Last time, after battling in the dungeon for a full day and night, the total ability proficiency increased by just over 700. This time, in just a daytime, with time spent on adventurer registration and purchasing equipment, the growth speed not only didn't slow down but instead became faster? It made no sense at all. Loki wanted to ask Riesel what he did after entering the dungeon, but upon careful consideration, she gave up. Her divine intuition told her that if she pursued this matter, she would likely be angry. This kid surely did something dangerous again. And indeed, he did. If Loki knew that Riesel not only reached the 5th floor today but also descended to the 7th floor, she would absolutely be furious. To ensure a good night's sleep tonight, Loki sensibly chose to change the topic. At this rate of growth, it won't be long before you can compete with some seasoned veterans who have struggled for several years at level 1. Loki's tone was somewhat lamenting. Completing the journey that takes the average adventurer years in just 2 days? It was truly unbelievable. Perhaps you'll break the record for the fastest ascent to level 2 and become the new record holder. Loki's evaluation was extremely high. I hope so. Riesel put on his clothes while looking at the translated status, lost in thought. Why do you look so concerned? Loki, seemingly carefree, spoke bluntly. Don't tell me you're dissatisfied with your growth speed. If you dare to humble brag like that, I might just have to throw a punch at you. You, a goddess, actually use the term humble brag? I'm surprised, Riesel, somewhat helpless. I was thinking about mag. Loki understood Riesel's meaning. Are you concerned that your mag hasn't grown at all? Loki voiced Riesel's thoughts. Yeah, Riesel nodded. The basic abilities are improving, but mag remains the same. It feels very wasteful. I understand. Loki nodded repeatedly and wholeheartedly agreed with his train of thought. With your inhuman growth speed, if you can't take advantage to boost mag, it does indeed feel like a waste of an innate skill. Mag was different from the other basic abilities. While abilities like STR, and Dex, and AGI determined physical qualities and close combat abilities, mag belonged to a different system. It determined the strength and effects of magic. For mages who relied on magic for victory and were not skilled in close combat, the importance of mag outweighed the other 4 basic abilities. Even if one didn't train the other 4 basic abilities, focusing solely on the mag could still yield powerful combat strength, possibly even surpassing that of close combat specialists. Magic, being a symbol of supernatural power, equivalent to a miracle, inherently possessed extraordinary power. In terms of status and power, it outclassed close combat. Therefore, anyone with the opportunity would want to develop mag, including Riesel. In the main world, I couldn't use magic anymore. Now, with new possibilities, having a chance to use magic again, if I don't make an effort, then it's my fault. Riesel silently contemplated in his mind. The issue lay in. Kiddo, your magic doesn't seem like something you can use casually, yet. Loki raised this question. Yes, Riesel sighed, recalling his own magic. Magic. Almighty. Memorize magic. Activate specific magic based on memory. The strength of the magic is determined by the basic ability of mag. Only effective for valid magic. This was the only magic that Riesel possessed, and it was an extremely versatile and potent magic with a high potential. Judging by the magic you've got, you should be able to activate any magic you've memorized. It's like being able to use all kinds of magic at once. As Loki brought up this topic, Riesel's expression started resembling that of a monster, at least in her eyes. This magic, isn't this too outrageous? Loki couldn't help but complain inwardly. Chapter 14, The Return of the Expedition Party. Throughout history, anyone who received blessings, no matter who they were, could have at least 1 and at most 3 magic slots. This was common knowledge. Even among the so-called magic race like the elves, after receiving blessings, they too only had 3 magic slots for awakening magic, and a 4th one would never appear. Of course, having only 3 magic slots for awakening didn't mean that one could only use 3 types of magic. Some people, due to the uniqueness of their awakened magic, could undergo multiple transformations or have effects with multiple variations. As a result, the number of usable magic exceeded the 3 slots. Take Loki Familia for example, there were 2 members with such abilities. A high elf who could transform her magic multiple times, depending on the amount of chant used. This allowed her to use 1 magic as if it were 3, ultimately enabling them to cast 9 different variations equivalent to possessing 9 different magic. Another member was also an elf, who awakened magic limited to the magic of the elf race. With this magic, she could cast magic used by her own race. In theory, she could cast all elven magic with just this one magic, surpassing the magic slots of any mage. Riesel, on the other hand, had awakened to only one magic. However, despite having only one magic, its effects, possibilities, and scope were greater than those mentioned earlier. Could this magic allow him to cast any magic stored in his memory? Did this mean that, with a sufficient number of remembered magic, he could use as many as he wanted? Despite its incredible nature, this magic had its limitations. From what I can see right now, there are 2 confirmed usage requirements for your magic. Loki said while holding up 2 fingers. First, you can only cast magic that you have memorized. If you can't remember the magic, you can't use it. Second, even if you have memorized the magic, if you haven't personally confirmed its effects, you still can't use it. In other words, if Riesel wanted to use someone else's magic, that person had to cast it in front of him. Moreover, he himself had to remember all the details of the casting process, conditions, effects, and power. Nothing could be missing. Those were the limitations of Almighty. Because of this, Riesel was currently unable to use any magic, as he had not witnessed any magic being cast before his eyes since coming to this world. Even if he had seen a priest healing him with magic in his main world, he couldn't use it now because the priest had used a magic chant with mysterious runes that he had never encountered before. The chanting process wasn't clear, and as a result, he couldn't remember the detailed process and conditions needed to cast that magic using Almighty. Therefore, Riesel was currently in a state where he couldn't use a single magic. Loki was aware of this fact as she rubbed her chin thoughtfully. This problem isn't that difficult to solve, Loki said thoughtfully. We have plenty of members in Familia, and there are many who can use magic. Just have those kids perform magic in front of you sincerely, even teach you how to use their magic. With your memory, you should be able to pick up several types of magic quickly. No. The seemingly carefree goddess had already noticed Riesel's exceptional memory as an innate skill, surprising him a bit. However, her proposition was quite helpful for him. Looking at the usage requirements of Almighty, there was nothing more convenient than having others personally teach him how to use their magic to trigger its effects. Let's do this then. Loki thought for a moment and gazed at Riesel. After everyone returns from the expedition, I'll find someone skilled to teach you how to use magic. How about that? Expedition. Riesel raised his brows slightly. That's right. Loki chuckled. Most of my kids are currently not at home but in the dungeon. The dungeon, as the world's largest mystery, still had many areas unexplored. This underground labyrinth with countless floors grew larger the deeper one went, and the distance from the surface increased. This situation naturally prevented some adventurers fighting at the forefront of the dungeon from easily traveling between Orario and the dungeon. It was said that going from the first floor to the 50th floor would take several days just for travel alone, and the round trip could easily exceed a week. Thus, the concept of an expedition emerged. The so-called expedition, as the name suggested, was an adventurer party of a large familia, acting like an army, venturing deep into the dungeon for battle. They went to floors ordinary adventurers couldn't easily reach, fought powerful monsters, stepped into uncharted floors, explored the unknown, and developed unexplored areas. Loki Familia was one of the strongest familias in Orario, specializing in exploration. The familia's role was to conquer the dungeon, explore unknown territories, and gain profit or fame. In the 2 days since Riesel joined Loki Familia, the main members of the Familia had just left for a dungeon expedition, leaving only a small number of lower-ranking members behind. In other words, when he joined Loki Familia, the true experts and geniuses of the Familia were fighting terrifying monsters in the underground labyrinth, far from the surface, beyond what he could currently handle. Thinking up to this point, Riesel's heartbeat slightly accelerated, and his eyes lit up with expectation. Oi oi oi, what do you want to do? Loki noticed his behavior. You're just a level 1 rookie for fuck's sake. Doing well on the upper floors is already good enough for you. Don't give me ideas about expeditions, it's not something you can participate in right now. Really? Riesel looked at her with disappointment. Loki's mouth twitched. This kid is actually thinking about joining an expedition. After receiving a blessing for only 2 days, he dares to think about expeditions. There must be something wrong with this kid's head. Why are there so many problem children in my familia? Loki couldn't help but think like that with resignation. Anyone eligible for the expedition must be at least a level 2 with a special talent, like a healer who can use healing magic, for example. Loki said while covering her face and sighing in an earnest and well-meaning manner. Even if you can learn other people's magic and become a special talent, Finn won't allow you to join the expedition unless you reach level 2. So, you better quickly dismiss any dangerous thoughts in your mind. Upon hearing Loki, Riesel stared at her for a moment, confirming that she wouldn't budge on this point, before reluctantly withdrawing his gaze with a hint of regret. Fine, Riesel reluctantly conceded. Let's talk about it when I reach level 2. Loki couldn't help but roll her eyes at him and sighed once again. She couldn't shake the feeling that her future days might not be peaceful under the antics of this kid. Let's see, the expedition party should be back soon. Loki had to change the subject. Just wait for 2 more days. Understood. Riesel nodded. Loki then broke into a big smile, looking somewhat mischievous. When Finn and the others come back and find out that our Familia has gained such a freakish monster, I wonder what expressions they'll have. Loki mused to herself. Especially Ace, also Bet, Tioni, and Tiona. They should be stimulated by this kid's growth speed, right? Now that I think about it, it makes me excited. The goddess of mischief chuckled like a mischievous child getting ready to watch some TV drama. And the day she looked forward to arrived even sooner than she imagined. The next day, when the sky outside began to brighten, Riesel, just like yesterday, woke up early. He quickly freshened up, took care of his morning routine in 5 minutes, and then got ready by putting on his armor and clothes. He wanted to head to the dungeon directly without wasting any time. Today, he planned to explore the dungeon all day and see if he could go down a few more floors. His status had grown after yesterday's update, especially Dex and AGI, both upgraded to E rank. According to the safe strategy guide, he could now safely explore the 8th floor. However, he naturally wasn't satisfied with the so-called safe strategy. So, his plan today was to go to the 10th floor, or even deeper into the dungeon. For this, he took the time to maintain his weapon with the items he bought before going to sleep last night, filled with enthusiasm, ready to make some noise. Thinking about entering a floor deeper than yesterday's 7th floor, he felt a slight excitement. I heard that starting from the 10th floor, much larger creatures like orcs will appear. I wonder how strong they are. Riesel's heart was full of anticipation. But just as he was about to set off with his primary and secondary weapons, suddenly, a voice echoed within Twilight Manor. They are back. Everyone is back. The expedition party has returned. The joyful shouts broke the morning silence, plunging the entire Twilight Manor into a commotion. Chaotic footsteps rang out and the sound of doors opening resounded in succession as if telling everyone that the entire occupant of Twilight Manor was rushing outside. Back. Riesel was also slightly surprised and immediately stood up. In his mind, images of figures mentioned in the original work floated one after another, causing him to squint his eyes. With his weapons, he walked out of his room towards the entrance of Twilight Manor. Chapter 15, First Class Adventurers. Loki Familia's base, Twilight Manor's entrance. Today, there was a lively atmosphere in this particular place, unlike anything seen in the past 2 days. One after another, members of the Familia, who were originally stationed in the manor, showed excitement and enthusiasm not seen before. They cheered and leaped with joy, welcoming a group of people. As Riesel descended from the tall tower and reached the entrance, the group was surrounded by the stationed Familia members, exuding happy and relaxed smiles, creating a warm atmosphere. His vision almost instantly locked onto the leaders of this group. There, several individuals stood out prominently among their peers, catching his eye. Finally back. The energetic cheers came from a girl with wheat-colored skin, dressed in a dancer-like fashion. She wore a cloth covering only her upper body, with a long wraparound skirt around her waist, exposing her belly button and graceful figure without hesitation. Tiona, you're so noisy. The one scolding the lively girl with wheat-colored skin was another girl, almost identical to the lively girl in everything except for waist-length hair and some body proportions. They looked like they were cut from the same mold. Damn it! How many times have you shouted since coming in? Beside them, a young beastman with animal ears, tail, and facial tattoos, looking like a rebellious gangster, shook his head in disbelief while wearing an annoyed expression. The Amazonas twins and the werewolf youth, positioned conspicuously, engaged in a playful argument. However, the 3 individuals standing next to these 3 were even more imposing. They formed a trio of Palom, Elf, and Dwarf. Palom, shorter and smaller than anyone present, with a childlike appearance. An elf with emerald long hair and a white robe, holding a silver staff, with long pointed ears and extraordinary beauty. A robust dwarf, clad in thick armor, slightly taller than the Palom but shorter than the elf, visibly muscular. These three individuals, as if guarding something, smiled at everyone, radiating a benevolent feeling. Riesel's vision swept over these three, but shortly afterward, it seemed as if something had irresistibly attracted his attention, and his gaze uncontrollably lingered on the last person's body. However, before he could thoroughly observe this person, a loud voice interrupted him, breaking into this warm gathering. "I missed you so much." Loki, shouting like a child, rushed out, heading towards the leading group. No, more accurately, she was charging towards the figure who had captured Riesel's attention. Ace. Like an uncle seeing a beloved niece, Loki screamed strangely and pounced on the figure. The entire crowd witnessed this. They saw the scene where the gentle long golden hair suddenly moved. Boom! Accompanied by an explosive sound, the long golden-haired figure sidestepped, delivering a punch to Loki's stomach. Gah! Loki immediately made a muffled cry, expelling all the air from her lungs, and collapsed in front of the golden-haired figure. "I'm back, Loki!" A voice devoid of any excitement or hesitation emanated from the golden-haired figure's mouth. The clear and pleasant voice revealed that the long golden-haired figure was undoubtedly a young and beautiful girl. And indeed, that was the case. The girl standing in front of the fallen Loki still retained a hint of childishness in her appearance. She seemed quite young, her slender body adorned in a light azure outfit. Her skin was delicate and smooth, with remarkably well-defined features. Her beauty easily rivaled that of elf and goddess. She had a pair of eyes that matched her hair color, subtly radiating a transparent glow. A mysterious aura surrounded her entire being as if she had stepped out of a painting, appearing almost unrealistically beautiful. The only downside was the lack of expression on her exquisite face, resembling a doll and giving off a sense of detachment. Confronted with this excessively beautiful doll-like girl, Loki could only manage to lift her face with difficulty. "Your skills have improved again, Ace." Loki forced a smile uglier than crying. "Well, Loki, serves you right, I guess." Tiona, the lively Amazoness girl, approached with her face full of delight at Loki's misfortune. "We're tired, Loki. Can you not bother us right now? Let us rest well, okay?" Another Amazoness girl, who seemed more mature than the lively one, appeared while sighing. Tch. The werewolf youth also wore an impatient expression, showing no respect for the goddess. However, there was no uncomfortable atmosphere between the two sides. Instead, there was a natural sense of harmony, indicating a not just good but excellent relationship, one where they could interact without reservation or hesitation. Family. Riesel observed this scene before him, seeing the scene that seemed somewhat distant and foreign to him. At this moment, the trio that had been watching from the sidelines approached. "We're back, Loki." The elf lady, or more precisely, the high elf lady, regal like a queen, spoke in a serious yet slightly warm tone towards Loki. "Get up quickly, don't lie down." The dwarf uncle cheerfully pulled Loki up, looking as if he were effortlessly lifting a doll. Finally, the shortest person in the group, with hair like sheaves of wheat and lake-like azure eyes, approached with an appearance more youthful than anyone else present, the Palom. "The expedition has ended smoothly with no casualties, but the gains aren't noteworthy. I'll explain the details later. For now, let everyone take a good bath and rest, Loki." With an unexpectedly mature tone, the Palom reported to Loki. "No problem." Loki suddenly grinned like nothing happened, addressing the group. "Well then, everyone, good job and rest well." "Yes." The returning members responded one after another. "Those who stayed, bring in the spoils we brought back." The Palom, in a matter-of-fact tone, instructed the people around. "Yes, Captain." The remaining members immediately went to help with moving things. Only Riesel remained standing in place, watching the group entering Twilight Manor with laughter and conversation, his gaze fixed on the three top executives throughout. Not only Riesel, but the rest of the Familia members, whether those staying at the base or those on the expedition, looked at the three top executives with admiration and affection. It was only natural. After all, those three individuals were the pinnacle of Loki Familia, the backbone of this Familia. They were powerful. They were renowned worldwide. Among the adventurers engaged in labyrinth exploration, all adventurers were categorized into high-class adventurers and low-class adventurers based on their level. Low-class adventurers referred to adventurers at level 1, while high-class adventurers was the title given to adventurers who had experienced a level up, reaching level 2 and above. High-class adventurer was further divided into third-class adventurer, second-class adventurer, and first-class adventurer. Adventurers at level 2 were considered third-class adventurers. Adventurers at level 3 and level 4 were classified as second-class adventurers. Adventurers at level 5 and above were recognized as first-class adventurers. Generally, if a familia had a third-class adventurer, it was considered to have gained some status in Orario, stepping out of the realm of a small familia. Therefore, if a familia had a first-class adventurer, it held significant influence in Orario. A familia with multiple first-class adventurers could be considered one of the top familia in Orario and even worldwide. Loki Familia, precisely one of these top familia, stood as one of the most prominent. Tiona Hiriot, level 5, Amazonas, Loki Familia's executive, bearing the alias Crusher. Tioni Hiriot, level 5, Amazonas, Loki Familia's executive, bearing the alias Hormungand. Betloga, level 5, Werewolf, Loki Familia's executive, bearing the alias Vanargand. These three were the Amazonas twin sisters and the werewolf youth who initiated the conversation earlier. They were the first-class adventurers within Loki Familia. The other trio had even more impressive backgrounds. Findium, level 6, Palam's hero, Loki Familia's captain and top executive, bearing the alias Braver. Riverial chose Elf, level 6, a high elf and elven royalty, Loki Familia's vice-captain and top executive, Orario's strongest mage, bearing the alias 9 Hell. Gareth Landrock, level 6, dwarf's warrior, Loki Familia's top executive, bearing the alias Elgurm. These three were the strongest members of Loki Familia, leading the Familia from its early days to its current glory, all level 6, a rarity in all of Orario. As for the last person, Riesel once again turned his gaze toward the doll-like girl walking among the group, a bit silent and reserved. Ace Wallenstein, level 5, Loki Familia's executive, the strongest swordswoman, bearing the alias Sword Princess. His few whispered words faded away like the wind. The golden-haired girl about to enter the tall tower seemed to have heard something, turned her head, and looked in Riesel's direction. Their eyes met in an instant. At that moment, in their eyes, it seemed as if there was only each other. Chapter 16, Uncanny Resemblance. Riesel's figure had a feature somewhat similar to Ace. That was the faint, transparent glow in their eyes. Even though his eyes were purely black, completely different from Ace's dazzling gold, others couldn't see any similarities. However, when they stared at each other, if a third person was observing them carefully, they would be surprised to discover an uncanny resemblance in their eyes. Both had a hint of transparent radiance. Both had a touch of indifference. Both also carried a determination imperceptible to outsiders. Riesel and Ace found themselves momentarily stunned when their eyes met for the first time. They discovered that the gaze of the other resembled their own, creating a strange sensation of seeing another version of themselves, like looking into a mirror and seeing their own eyes reflected. This peculiar feeling held them in a prolonged gaze, seemingly forgetting the people around them and neglecting to avert their eyes, lost in a wordless connection. Eventually, Riesel was the first to break free from this strange state. Under Ace's gaze, he nodded in acknowledgement, then turned around to join other members, assisting in transporting the spoils brought back by the expedition party. Ace watched Riesel silently, her transparent golden eyes flashing slightly. "Miss Ace." A voice suddenly brought her back to reality. It was an elf girl standing behind Ace, more like a follower than a companion. She tied her chestnut-colored long hair into a lengthy ponytail that hung down her back. With pointed ears peeking through a strand of hair on either side of her face, she looked younger than Ace but possessed a breathtakingly beautiful face. "Lafia." Ace, realizing the elf's presence, subconsciously said her name. "Yes." Lafia repeatedly nodded. Somewhat uncertain, she asked timidly. "What were you looking at?" Ace was about to answer but was interrupted by another girl who had pounced on her back. "I saw it." With such a lively voice, precisely another executive of Loki Familia, a level 5 first-class adventurer, and Ace's peer, the Amazonas Tiona. Ace was just looking at a boy. "Hee hee." Tiona teased first, then looked towards Riesel, puzzled. "By the way, who's that boy? We haven't seen him before, right?" "Idiot." Tioni, seemingly drawn into the conversation, crossed her arms, glanced at the busy Riesel with no interest, and spoke without any enthusiasm. "Since he's someone we haven't seen before, he's either a newly joined rookie or not from our familia." Bulletin, but he's helping with the lifting. Lefia couldn't help but glance at Riesel a few times and murmur. Since he's helping and inside our base, he must be a rookie, right? Ah. So that's how it is. Tiona looked like she had just realized something. A rookie, and a male at that. Domu. Loki hasn't recruited a male into the Familia for who knows how long. Don't you notice the revolting behavior Loki's got going on? She's all about those cute and pretty girls, isn't she? Tiona rolled her eyes. But Ace, you're actually paying attention to a rookie, and what's more, he's a dude. That's pretty unusual. On the side, Lefia nodded vigorously, staring at Riesel's figure, and for some unknown reason, with a slightly vicious expression. Ace, unaware of this, remained silent amid the continuous verbal onslaught. Her gaze continued to follow Riesel's back, lost in thought. This scene made the Amazonas twin sisters exchange a knowing glance. It's really my first time seeing her like this, Tiona expressed surprise, then added with a snicker. Could it be that our doll princess has finally reached puberty? If everyone knew, it would definitely be interesting, yet. Tiona said innocently, then added with a mischievous grin. Especially Loki and Bet. Her words smoothly caught the attention of those who were curious. Oi, foolish Amazonas, what are you saying about me again? Bet glared at Tiona. Blee blee blee. Tiona stuck her tongue out at him. Not telling you, just figure it out yourself. Humph. This moron Bet looked visibly displeased. Just as the two were about to quarrel, Gareth, breaking away from the conversation between Finn and Loki, shouted at everyone. Don't play around there. Hurry up and go in for a bath and sleep. People are waiting in line behind to use the bathroom. The admonition finally quieted everyone down, and they quickly entered the manor, making use of the time to clean up and rest. Only Ace remained standing in place, causing Riveria to approach slowly. What happened, Ace? Riveria maintained her solemn tone, but her gaze toward Ace was gentler than toward anyone else, not like looking at a junior in the Familia but more like looking at her own daughter. Nothing. Ace chose not to voice her feelings, nor did she look again at the busy Riesel. After a slight acknowledgement, she turned and walked away. Riveria watched Ace's back with a hint of compassion in her eyes, shortly afterward shifting her gaze to Riesel's figure. A rookie? Riveria pondered. No one knew that everything happening here was being observed by Loki, who was paying careful attention. So, they discovered that kid's presence so quickly, Loki observed calmly, feeling oddly pleased. Loki. Finn, who was conversing with Loki, looked at the suddenly silent goddess and called her name. Sorry, got slightly absent-minded. Loki snapped back to reality, giving a casual laugh. You guys go handle your own things, rest a bit, and we'll talk about anything important tonight. Okay. Finn nodded. I'll go in first. We can deal with the spoils tomorrow. Go ahead. Loki waved her hand, dismissing her Familia captain. After the members of the expedition left, Loki grinned and shouted in Riesel's direction. Kiddo, come back early tonight, don't make too much trouble, okay? The shout from behind made Riesel pause for a moment. He knew Loki was fulfilling the promise from last night, introducing him to his mentor for magic. I know. Riesel could only suppress the somewhat restless thoughts in his mind and abandon the plan to delve deeper into the dungeon today. Time flies by quickly. As the day darkened once again, Orario welcomed back adventurers returning safely from the dungeon, along with the common folk finishing their day's work. It seemed like only at this time people would disregard their identities and racial differences, mingling together on the lively and relaxed streets. This atmosphere was undoubtedly the most intense in Twilight Manor today. Perhaps it was because everyone from the expedition party had returned, Loki Familia became much livelier than the past 2 days, and the atmosphere was quite vibrant. After great rest, numerous members who returned from the expedition finally shook off the fatigue of consecutive battles. They shed their equipment and immersed themselves in the relaxed and pleasant atmosphere of the Familia. Normally, at this time, the Familia would begin settling the gains from the expedition. Even Finn as the captain, considering the hardships of the expedition, empathized with the members and decided to handle the spoils tomorrow. Dealing with things other than spoils at this moment was still tolerable. For example, many Familia members were eager to update their status with Loki, to see how much they had grown this time and if they could accumulate valuable Excelia for a level up. Unfortunately, Loki seemed to have no mood to handle this today. Playing the role of a whimsical goddess, she postponed the tasks to update everyone's status. Let's talk about it in a couple of days. Loki left that sentence for the helpless Familia members, who had no choice but to comply. After the expedition, the main task for the Familia was handling the spoils. There were few other tasks to complete, allowing everyone to enjoy a rare period of leisure before the next expedition. Hence, many were not in a hurry. In this situation, all the executives of the Familia gathered in Loki's divine room. It seems like everyone has rested well. Loki looked at the state of mind of her children and nodded in satisfaction. However, Bet seemed a bit unhappy about this. What's up? Why'd you call us all here out of the blue? He seemed to be complaining that the goddess disrupted his plans. But his eyes kept drifting towards Ace, his tail wagging back and forth, proving his words were insincere. To call us all here suddenly is indeed rare. Tiona said while holding onto Ace's arm affectionately, which made Bet secretly annoyed. I thought you would only call Captain for a talk. Tiona crossed her arms. I don't mind though, as long as Captain is there, I'll be there. Finn could only show a face full of helplessness as he heard Tiona's statement. Riveria shook her head and sat beside Ace, waiting quietly for Loki to speak. Why did you call all the executives here? Gareth stroked his long beard, looking at Loki and making an inquiry. Throughout, Ace made no movements or sounds and stayed silent. Loki, with hands on her hips, proudly spoke. No worries. I just want to introduce a troublesome brat to everyone. Upon hearing that, everyone was momentarily stunned. Introduce someone. They were all even more confused. Who could make their goddess, who usually had no proper manner, treat affairs so seriously? What's more, she gathered all the executives just to introduce someone. Everyone present looked at each other, curiosity building up. Chapter 17, Introduction. At this moment, Riesel had no idea that Loki had already gathered the entire Familia's first-class adventurers for him. He ran through the streets, glancing at the completely darkened sky, and couldn't help but sigh. I'm completely late now. With Loki's prior instructions, Riesel had initially planned to explore only the 7th floor, not going any further to avoid wasting too much time and returning to the Familia too late. But due to his visible growth in strength after the status update, he found himself getting stronger, and even on the 7th floor, there was no longer any excitement. Unable to hold back, he descended to the 8th floor. This decision led to an uncontrollable situation. Why did I get so excited again and completely forget about the time? Riesel slapped his forehead, unable to suppress another sigh. He knew it was his bad habit. In this second life, he became extremely eager for excitement and change. Now, with the effect of the skill Endless, he attained the highest rank of development abilities, making his stamina and energy seem inexhaustible. If he immersed himself in something, it was only natural for him to forget the time. If it weren't for his growling stomach begging to be filled, he might have kept on with the killing spree, not giving a second thought to heading back. I hope Loki hasn't waited too long. Riesel quickened his pace to return to the Familia. With his current speed and almost limitless stamina, he made good time. Before long, he smoothly returned to the Familia's base, back to Twilight Manor. Oi! Riesel! As Riesel prepared to enter the manor directly, a voice came from above, causing him to halt. Looking up, Riesel realized that Loki was leaning out of a window on the top floor of the central tower, waving at him. You're finally back! Loki shouted gruffly. Hurry up and come up, everyone's waiting for you. Without further ado, Riesel nodded in understanding and headed straight to his room. He stripped off his dirty clothes and armor, placed his weapons by the bed, tidied himself up a bit, and then quickly made his way to the divine room. Here he is. Come in quickly. Without waiting for Riesel to knock, Loki, as if anticipating his arrival, opened the door and ushered him inside. He entered the room, instantly bathed in the gazes of everyone present. Glancing around, he instantly raised his eyebrows in surprise. Well, all the Familia's first-class adventurers are here. As Riesel thought like that, the people in the room also observed him. It's him, Ace, who had been silent in the corner, gently froze upon seeing Riesel. Aren't you the rookie Ace was spying on today? Tiona exclaimed in surprise. Her words contained so much information that everyone present, including Riesel, was left stunned. Ace was spying on someone. Finn and Gareth simultaneously exclaimed and wore puzzled expressions. So, Loki was talking about him. Riveria also gave Riesel a once-over. Indeed, Tiona, staying by Finn's side, was somewhat surprised as well. Only Bet stared blankly for a while, then exploded. "You foolish Amazonas! What bullshit are you spouting again?" Bet snapped with bared teeth. "Ace would never spy on such a small fry, right? You're the one being foolish." Tiona, annoyed, retorted bluntly. "Why don't you go ask Ace herself?" All eyes turned to Ace. Ace, with a slightly embarrassed expression, struggled to explain and ended up blushing, not out of timidity, but out of embarrassment. After all, why did Tiona have to phrase it in such a way that could be easily misunderstood? So, Ace didn't want to speak and dared not look at Riesel's expression at this moment. Riesel, on the other hand, also didn't dare to glance at Ace. Although Tiona's bizarre statement made him pause for a moment, he quickly composed himself, taking the initiative to change the topic. "I'm sorry for being late." Riesel apologized to all his Familia's seniors present. Tch. Bet, with a disdainful expression, turned away, seemingly uninterested in saying anything to Riesel. Instead, he glared at Tiona, irritated by her unpleasant phrasing. Everyone fell silent, looking towards their captain. "Are you the rookie Loki mentioned?" Finn gave Riesel a generous smile. Despite Riesel's attitude, Finn remained friendly, even expressing some appreciation. "Venturing into the dungeon until this time, you're a hard worker one." As the captain, Finn wouldn't blame someone for being a little late, especially considering the rookie's achievement who ventured into the dungeon until this hour. "Thank you for your understanding." Riesel also didn't underestimate Finn, despite his deceptive appearance. After all, the Palom before him, who looked like an underage human child, was not only a level 6 first-class adventurer but also considered a hope and a hero within his race. He had led Loki Familia for decades, turning it from a newly established small familia into one of the strongest familia in Orario. With numerous adventures and a personal epic, he was a legendary figure known worldwide. So, whether it was the elven royalty like Riveria or the distinct and independent personalities of the Familia executives present, they all sincerely respected Finn, who seemed to lack any authority. Even Loki as the Familia's goddess was now just smiling and watching everything unfold, completely giving the stage to Finn. This clearly demonstrated his ability and prestige. In addition, despite his youthful appearance, Finn was already 42 years old, older than Riesel in his previous life. All in all, Riesel had no reason to underestimate Finn. On the other hand, Finn was filled with goodwill and curiosity as he faced Riesel calmly standing before him. "Loki couldn't stop praising you. She was just singing your praises endlessly in front of us, you know." Finn chuckled. "To be the subject of Loki's admiration, it's a rare thing honestly. I'm quite curious about you." Yet. Tiona couldn't hold back any longer. She raised her hand and shouted eagerly. "Loki really admires you. We've never seen her talk about a guy so much before." "Yet, there are quite a few girls," Tiona added with perfect timing and spoke mysteriously. But Loki only praised their looks and figures. Everyone present immediately nodded in agreement. Loki, who had been smiling, lost her smile after hearing that statement. "Did they just blatantly talk shit about me? I'm your goddess, for fuck's sake. You guys are totally enjoying this." "Humph. Serves you right." Bet threw in a remark from the side, almost causing Loki to snap. "Okay, enough fooling around." Gareth slapped the table, stopping the atmosphere that was gradually turning sour. "I'm genuinely curious. This kid must have some talent to be praised so much by Loki. I heard you joined the Familia just a few days ago and received the blessing around the same time," Riveria interjected. "Loki mentioned you have something to ask of us. Just tell us. As long as it's not too much, as members of the same Familia, we'll absolutely try to help you." Her attitude matched that of the others towards Riesel friendly. However, the lone werewolf Bet still stood there, sporting a disdainful expression and a hint of impatience. It appeared that he didn't quite fancy Riesel. Just a small fry who received the blessing a few days ago. "I don't know why you guys are being so attentive to him," Bet complained grumpily, making the atmosphere subtly tense. "Bet," Finn warned with a furrowed brow, causing Bet to snort lightly, not pushing it too far. "Ignore him. He's just foul-mouthed." The twin sisters, Tiona and Tioni, approached Riesel and comforted him. Ace shifted her gaze back to Riesel and observed him with worry. But Riesel only glanced at Bet, who showed no remorse on his face and calmly shook his head, unfazed. "Thanks for the concern, I'm fine and not bothered at all. Riesel pondered for a moment, then continued. But, speaking of which, I do have an awkward request. I was hoping seniors could lend me a hand. Hey, what is it? Finn chuckled and was still a bit unclear about it. After all, Loki had gathered everyone here to introduce Riesel, and the only reason could be for this so-called awkward request. In other words, she was indirectly telling them to assist Riesel. With this thought in mind, Finn exchanged glances with the other two top executives, waiting for Riesel to speak up. In this silent situation, Riesel finally opened his mouth. I want to consult about magic. With just one sentence, everyone blinked in surprise. Consult about magic. Riveria, who was known as the strongest mage in Orario, became intrigued when the request involved magic. Yes. Riesel nodded. I've awakened a magic, but to use it, I need to meet certain conditions. The specifics of these conditions didn't need much explanation. In short, he needed someone he could consult with to be able to use his magic. What kind of magic is it? Tiona couldn't contain her curiosity. Finn, Riveria, and Gareth all looked directly at Loki. Well, his magic is somewhat similar to Lefia's elf ring. Loki chuckled and remarked mysteriously. With just one sentence, everyone simultaneously raised their eyebrows in surprise, and the way they looked at Riesel also started to change. Chapter 18, First Mentor. Lefia Voridis. This morning, she was by Ace's side, always following behind her like a fangirl. Even though Lefia wasn't present, in the hearts of the executives present, the position of that elf was quite significant. The reason was straightforward. Lefia, who was a junior and treated as the second string in Loki Familia, had already received a blessing due to her formal education in the school district. Unlike someone like Riesel, who joined as an ordinary person, she joined the Familia with a bestowed blessing. She was a legitimate mage who not only possessed outstanding magic but also had specialized skills that enhanced her magical prowess. As a rearguard mage, she was considered perfect, even though she was only a level 3, and not a level 5 or higher first-class adventurer. With her skills in excellent she wielded firepower comparable to a level 5 first-class mage. In other words, Lefia was a genius with a full bag of innate magical talent. Even as a junior in the Familia, this elf was highly regarded by the Familia executives. Especially for Riveria, who was also a mage and an elf, there was a subtle sense that she was grooming this junior as her successor. And who was Riveria? High elf, elven royalty, Orario's strongest mage, and Loki Familia's vice-captain, as well as top executive. She was adorned with a halo. As the successor to such a character, Lefia's lowest achievement in the future will be as the second in command of the Familia, or perhaps even surpassing Riveria to become the world's strongest mage. Lefia, as a magical genius, not only possessed 3 magic but one of her magic was particularly special. She could cast any magic of the elf race, a magic known as the elf ring. As long as she fully understood the magic's effects and chant, she could cast any elven magic. Now, Loki was saying that Riesel's magic was somewhat similar to Lefia's elf ring. Didn't that mean this rookie in front of them, like Lefia, could cast anyone's magic as long as he fully understood its effects and chant? This is truly surprising, Gareth couldn't help but exclaim. Yuri also marveled. I didn't expect another mage like Lefia. Mage? Him. Loki raised an eyebrow. You must be kidding me. This kid, becoming a rearguard and peacefully casting magic from behind? Nah. He can't be a mage in any way. Thinking about Riesel's rapidly growing status, she felt a headache coming on. I think this kid seems to be of the same type as Ace, both being problem children who won't settle down unless they go on a rampage amid the monsters. Loki remarked. Her statement made everyone look at Riesel in a somewhat awkward manner. Same type as Ace. Really? The Amazonas twin sisters were whispering to each other. Bet frowned, while Finn tapped the desk with his finger, lost in thought. Meanwhile, Riesel and Ace once again glanced at each other unintentionally. Riesel immediately looked away while Ace remained expressionless with eyes flickering with a subtle light. Like me. Ace recalled the strange resemblance in his eyes earlier, reminiscent of her own reflection in the mirror. Inside the room, an eerie and unfathomable mystery-filled silence emerged for no apparent reason. Clap. Okay, stop overthinking it. Loki clapped her hands, redirecting everyone's attention. Let's focus on solving this kid's problem. Who's gonna teach him magic? As soon as the question was thrown out, 2 people immediately declared their exit. Don't count on me. Bet's voice was cold. I have no interest in teaching a small fry like him. After saying that, as if touched by something painful, he didn't linger any longer and left the room directly. No one said anything as they watched this scene unfold. Clearly, they thought Bet was better off leaving, and they let him go without a fuss. I can't do it either. The second person to announce their exit was the lively and cheerful Tiona. However, her reason was different from Bet's. I don't have magic. Even if you ask me to teach him, what can I teach? Tiona looked dejected, her face filled with resentment. Magic was such a power, it could awaken from the start or never find the right trigger, leaving someone unable to use it their entire life. She was clearly in the latter category, so even though she was a level 5 first-class adventurer, she still couldn't use any magic, sticking to pure close combat. So Finn, Riveria, Gareth, and Tioni will teach. Loki confirmed. I'll pass. Finn thought carefully and shook his head regretfully. My magic has too many obvious side effects. It's not suitable for a beginner adventurer to learn. He's better off not learning my magic. If Captain says so, I'll pass too. Tioni immediately followed Finn's lead. My magic doesn't have much power. It's better to let Riveria teach him. Right, let this stubborn elf be his teacher. Gareth laughed. Anyway, she's like a mom who likes to meddle with her kids. Let her handle his magic training. Who's a mom? Riveria glared at Gareth but didn't reject the proposal. If she could add a powerful rearguard mage to the Familia, she wouldn't refuse, especially considering that Rizel seemed to be a genius rookie with even fewer restrictions than Lefi Ya. Lefi Ya's elf ring was limited to the elf race, allowing her to learn and use elven magic. Rizel's magic, on the other hand, based on Loki's on-the-spot inquiry, was undoubtedly not restricted by race. With various races present, including elves, Palams, dwarves, Amazonesses, and beastmen, Rizel, if able to learn the magic of everyone present, would practically be able to learn all the magic in the world. This potential, this innate skill, surpassed even Lefi Ya's. In this way, it was only natural for her not to ignore such a potential. As the strongest mage in Orario known as Nine Hell, if there was a way for him to learn her magic, no one would want to refuse. Just as everyone was thinking that way, Rizel suddenly spoke up. Can I learn magic from Miss Ace? Instead of getting dejected, Rizel gazed at Ace and completely ignored the others. Me? Ace was instantly stunned. Everyone collectively paused for a moment, then simultaneously furrowed their brows. Including Loki. Kiddo Loki hesitated, looking like she had something to say. I think you should try someone else. Right. Finn agreed, with a calm face. Ace's magic is a bit unique. Even if your magic can learn and use other people's magic, whether you can successfully learn her magic is really uncertain. The rest also looked at Rizel with strange expressions, then exchanged glances between Rizel and Ace. Only Tiona, with a puzzled expression, spoke up. Isn't that great? Ace's magic is so powerful. If he could learn it, our Familia would have 2 super-powered combatants in the future. You better keep quiet. Tiona's mouth was immediately covered by Tioni's hand. Ignoring her sister's struggle, Tioni dragged her away out of the room. Let me teach you instead. Riveria said while staring at Rizel solemnly. Ace's magic, to some extent, is dangerous to use. Even if you can learn it, I don't recommend you to use it. Moreover, Ace absolutely wouldn't want to teach it to anyone. Her magic holds a special significance for her. Riveria didn't voice her thought but glanced at Ace. Ace had already lowered her head, making it impossible for anyone to discern her expression. The atmosphere in the room underwent another subtle change. As I thought, is this matter a bit sensitive? Rizel didn't feel surprised by their reactions. As someone familiar with the original work, he naturally understood why everyone reacted the way they did when he expressed his desire to learn Ace's magic. Tiona and Tioni seemed fine, they probably weren't aware of the hidden details. But the 3 top executives and the goddess, as the higher UPS of the Familia, undoubtedly had some understanding of Ace's situation. Despite knowing this, Rizel still brought up the idea. There was no other reason. I've heard about Miss Ace's magic, and I believe it's the most suitable magic for me at this moment. Rizel spoke sincerely and openly, shifting his gaze directly at Ace. Although it may sound abrupt and even presumptuous, it's very important for me. Could you please agree to my request? Rizel hesitated for a moment and added. I really want to become strong quickly. The weight carried by his words was easily felt by everyone present. Want to become strong quickly, Ace muttered, finally moved and lifted her head. The third gaze exchange between the two of them took place again, while the others fell silent, refraining from saying anything more. Silence permeated the room. It wasn't until much later that Ace finally spoke up. I'll teach you. After she uttered those words, Riesel immediately bowed his head to her, expressing gratitude. Thank you very much. Chapter 19, Ultra Short Chant Magic. Twilight Manor, Courtyard. In this small courtyard, shaped like a circle around the central tower, Riesel stepped out from the manor, carrying a slender sword as his main weapon. Several towers stood side by side, causing the courtyard to be somewhat dimly lit. Despite well-cared-for flowers and plants flourishing around, shadows still lingered. This resulted in a peculiar situation where, even though it was broad daylight, the light in this place wasn't quite sufficient, making one question if it was still nighttime. Fortunately, the courtyard was equipped with small fountains and magic stone lamp posts. The soft glow from the magic stone lamps alleviated the inconvenience, at least to some extent. Walking through the courtyard, Riesel made his way to the corner. Swish! Suddenly, the sound of something slicing through the air resonated. It was the sound created by the movement of a sword swinging through the air. Riesel halted his step, turning his gaze towards the source of the sound. In the next moment, he laid eyes on the girl he was supposed to meet here. The doll-like girl with golden hair held a bright silver sword, engaging in training. Her calm expression turned indifferent and her eyes became extremely sharp. With each swing of her sword, she cut through the air sharply, creating flashes of silver light, astonishingly fast. Chopping vertically, slashing horizontally, cutting diagonally, thrusting forward and making swift slices, a girl, as beautiful as an elf and as mysterious as a goddess, stood on a lush green patch of ground, continuously wielding her beloved sword. It was as if she perceived an unseen enemy right before her, or perhaps feared that she might come to a standstill. She danced alone in an intense swordplay, lost in the rhythm of her own movements. Observing this scene, Riesel remained silent, refraining from disturbing her or making any unnecessary moves, simply standing in place and watching with his eyes bright and focused. He was learning her swordsmanship and attempting to understand the trajectory of her sword swings. Unfortunately, her sword was too fast, to the point where he couldn't keep up with her movements. All he could see were silver streaks dancing in the air, and nothing more. Despite this, he did not feel bored. He continued to watch attentively until the sunlight descended from the sky, illuminating the entire courtyard. Huff! Finally, Ace stopped. She raised her sword upward, then sheathed it. After finishing her exercise, she turned towards Riesel. Sorry, Ace said somewhat apologetically, lowering her eyes slightly. Made you wait? No. Riesel shook his head and calmly responded. I should thank you for letting me observe your training. Really? Ace tilted her head, seeming a bit puzzled, and hesitated. Was it helpful for you? Of course. Riesel paused, then nodded. After all, as you can see, like you, I also wield a sword. He raised the weapon in his hand, bringing it into Ace's view. A sword. Ace was somewhat surprised and somewhat astonished. You're really not a mage? At least, I'm not the kind of pure rearguard mage, Riesel responded and thought for a moment. I prefer charging into the enemy directly rather than staying at the back and using magic. After all, that's undoubtedly more exciting. Riesel said the true reason in his mind. Ace then recalled Loki's remarks from yesterday. I think this kid seems to be of the same type as Ace, both being problem children who won't settle down unless they go on a rampage amid the monsters. As she thought about that, Ace couldn't help but feel a bit of closeness to him. She just felt that this rookie, highly praised by Loki, was quite similar to herself in various aspects. Now, he even wanted to learn her magic. Just thinking about it, Ace couldn't help but feel a complex mix of emotions. Can I ask you a question? Driven by these complex emotions, Ace turned her head to Riesel and asked. Go ahead. Riesel seemed to have some idea of what Ace was about to ask, with his expression remaining unchanged. Why me? Ace carefully chose her words but ended up saying them somewhat clumsily. Riveria is willing to teach you. Even with the strongest mage in Orario offering to do so, why choose me when you could learn from her? My magic isn't as flashy as Riveria's or Lefia's, with powerful effects and range. That was how Ace saw her own magic. Riesel also knew that if he wanted to be powerful, generally accepted magic in line with people's expectations of the term, learning from Riveria would be the best choice. Her magic was known for its firepower, capable of incinerating enemies even higher leveled than herself, or scorching a large area around. In comparison, Ace's magic, though unique, lacked that decisive power and firepower. Therefore, under normal circumstances, one would prefer to learn Riveria's magic. Unaware of Ace's thoughts, Riesel had his own considerations. As I mentioned yesterday, I personally believe that your magic is the most suitable for me at this moment, he explained while looking directly at her face. As everyone knows, all magic in the world shares a common usage requirement: you must recite a fixed chant, also known as chanting. As she heard his reason, Ace nodded in agreement. Chanting was the only way to use magic. It served as the trigger for magic, stabilized one's mind to smoothly convert the basic ability of mag into fuel, and released the phenomenon known as magic. This held true in both the main world and this world. Generally speaking, the longer the chant of magic, the more time it took to chant, and the more astonishing the power and effects of the said magic. However, this didn't mean that magic with a lengthy chant was a good thing. Magic with a long chant may indeed be extremely powerful. On the other hand, the time it takes to cast becomes long, leading to various problems. That was how Riesel saw it. Setting aside interruptions and unexpected events during casting, for the growth of status, having magic with a long chant is not a good thing. Magic that took time to cast inevitably had many limitations in its usage, with few opportunities to use it. And if there were fewer chances to use magic, the growth of mag became less optimistic. Whether it was mag or other basic abilities like STR, and Dex, or AGI, the way to make them grow was to use them frequently. If one didn't get the chance to use them regularly, it meant that basic abilities related to the power and effects of magic, such as mag, were challenging to improve. Because of this, many mages put a lot of effort into finding opportunities to unleash their magic. However, the power of magic was extraordinary, a supernatural force that could cause massive destruction with just one strike. Inside the city, it was generally difficult to find opportunities to use it. Even when entering the dungeon and casting magic in it while facing attacks from monsters, whether mages could maintain their composure and focus to smoothly chant their magic was another uncertainty. Therefore, the improvement of mag was acknowledged to be more challenging than other basic abilities and considerably more so. Similarly, once this ability was enhanced, the direct impact was a significant improvement in one's magic power, effects, and more. The reason Riesel chose Ace's magic was that, in his view, within the entire Loki Familia, only her magic was the easiest to use. If I'm not mistaken, your magic should belong to the ultra-short chant type, right? Riesel's inquiry was met with a confirming gesture from Ace. Basically, magic was divided into ultra-short chant, long chant, and ultra-long chant. The longer the chant, the stronger the magic, but the usage time and convenience would decrease. Conversely, the shorter the chant, the weaker the magic, but it would possess the convenience of being able to be activated quickly. Ultra-short chant magic is the easiest magic to use. Riesel stated his purpose clearly. I just want to learn magic that's easy to use, magic that can be used frequently. That's the way to train mag. Riesel calmly smiled and continued. And once mag is improved, the scale and effectiveness of magic will also increase. When I learn other magic in the future, the power and effects of the magic won't be limited by the low mag. They might even show stronger power and effects because my mag has been improved. He had long decided that his first magic had to be an ultra-short chant magic. Only by getting a hold of ultra-short chant magic first, could the growth potential of his future magic be ensured. Of course, this would inevitably cause a problem. That was, the magic he learned would inevitably not have too much power and effect. However, in the face of the swordswoman before him, this problem did not exist. Because the only magic Ace possessed, classified as an ultra-short chant magic, actually belonged to an extraordinary type. Its effects were not only not weak but rather acknowledged as strong. How strong? Strong enough that Ace, despite being only level 5, while there were influential figures at level 6 and level 7 above her, could still stand out and become the strongest swordswoman in everyone's eyes. Therefore, could you please use your magic? Riesel requested with an earnest expression. After a moment of silence, Ace responded. Tempest. Whoosh. The wind began to swirl around her body. Chapter 20, Ariel. In the courtyard, an unknown and beautiful scene quietly unfolded. The wind was picking up. The wind was gathering. Visible air currents, like a playful fairy, suddenly swept in from all directions, wrapping around Ace's body. In this visible wind, the girl, enveloped by the gentle breeze, had golden hair that shimmered like sand, dancing in the air. It was a sight as beautiful as a painting. "This is my magic," Ace said calmly while being surrounded by the wind as if she had transformed into a wind spirit. Riesel stared intently at the wind around her body, memories in his mind coming to life. Ariel. That was Ace's only usable magic, an enchant-type magic. Enchant-type magic could attach a certain magical attribute to oneself or objects one touches, enhancing one's power and abilities. Ace's Ariel was a wind element enchant-type magic. The chant for this magic consisted of only one word, an ultra-short chant. This made it exceptionally fast to cast, with a difficulty level surprisingly low compared to other magic. When activated, the magic provided the caster with the protection of the wind, the power of the wind element, control over wind force, and the ability to wrap wind around the body and weapon. It served as both protection and assistance in attacks, increasing speed and even granting the ability to fly short distances. It was almost an all-in-one package of attack, defense, speed, and support, with the only drawback being its inability to perform long-distance attacks. Now, this magic was unfolding before Riesel's eyes, imprinted in his memory. At this moment, he felt it. His memories were stirring. Tempest. As if by instinct, Riesel chanted the ultra-short chant he had just heard a few seconds ago. The stirring memories immediately responded to his chant. Whoosh! The wind swept in again. However, this time, it came from all directions. It started off faint, but gradually, the powerful wind created by the atmosphere became more and more spectacular, wrapping around Riesel's body. My magic Ace's attractive eyes widened involuntarily. Not only Ace but even Riesel in the courtyard failed to notice that, above, several windows were open, allowing lines of sight to peek through, gazing in their direction. Succeeded. Loki muttered in astonishment as she looked at Riesel effortlessly using Ace's magic. Her expression was quite comical, unsure if she was crying or laughing. That rookie actually pulled off Ace's magic. This is going to be interesting. The Amazonas twins peeked from their room, clearly witnessing everything. TCH. Bet clicked his tongue silently and turned away. Meanwhile, Finn, Riveria, and Gareth gathered in the same room, looking at each other in dismay as they watched a boy and a girl entwined with the wind in the courtyard. It really worked, Finn sighed emotionally. It seems our rookie, in terms of uniqueness, might be the best in the entire Familia. Isn't that obvious? Gareth quipped, his muscular arms crossed. If he can learn Ace's magic, could it be that kid isn't an ordinary human like Ace? At his speculation, Riveria remained silent, only staring at Riesel's figure, then at Ace's with her brow slightly furrowed. She knew very well how special Ace's magic was. At first glance, it seemed like just a typical enchant-type magic with nothing extraordinary. Enchant-type magic wasn't even that rare in Orario, there were probably dozens of adventurers with enchant-type magic, and even in Loki Familia, Ace wasn't the only one with it. But compared to those enchant-type magic, Ace's enchant-type magic had a strong difference. The ultra-short chant was just one of the characteristics of this magic. The true uniqueness of this magic, visible only through use, was something impossible to discern with the naked eye. Riesel Brynhart. Riveria muttered. I wonder if letting him learn Ace's magic is a good or bad thing. Hearing her mutter, both Finn and Gareth remained silent. It wasn't until after a while that Finn broke the silence. Regardless, we have a highly potential genius in our Familia, which is a good thing. Finn smiled slightly. Train him well, and he might become another Familia's backbone in the future. Yeah, Gareth chuckled, stroking his long beard. I get it now. Loki gathered us all, and introduced that kid to us, not just for us to simply teach him magic, no. She wants us to focus on cultivating him, right? Riveria looked at Finn. What's your plan, Finn? For now, I don't plan to do anything special. Finn bit his thumbnail, thinking for a moment. He joined the Familia just 2 days ago, and he's had the blessing for only 2 days. Now is precisely the time for him to lay the foundation and clarify his own path. If we interfere hastily, it might be counterproductive. Oh. Gareth raised an eyebrow. Are you worried we'll lead him astray? That's right. Riveria agreed with Finn's view. We don't know enough about him, and his combat style hasn't fully developed. If we interfere randomly, he might be influenced by us. Everyone should have their own path, their own development the one that suits them best. Riesel was still too young in their eyes, and his time for growth was too short. Before he clarified his own development and path, if he was influenced too much by others, he might end up on a path that was completely unsuitable for him. That was not good and must be avoided. Therefore, Finn didn't plan to intervene too early in Riesel's growth stage. Later, I'll go have a chat with Loki and see if she can spill some beans, Finn said with a smile. Judging by her attitude yesterday, there's probably something special about Riesel's body that we don't know about yet. We need to understand it before making any plans. What else is that kid hiding? Gareth muttered with anticipation. What could it be? Damn, it's really intriguing. It could be skills or other magic, Riveria said while looking thoughtful. Either way, Loki's attitude definitely signals something. In just a few words, the three top executives of Loki Familia settled on a plan for dealing with Riesel. This also indicated that from this moment on, he officially entered the attention of Familia higher ups, garnering importance. However, the three top executives, as well as those secretly observing, were unaware that they were still underestimating him. What happened next would shatter their perception of him, making them reconsider and truly understand his uniqueness. Ace continued to gaze silently at Riesel, who was surrounded by swirling wind, confirming his current state. Really learned. Ace found it challenging to describe her feelings at this moment. Seeing someone else, like her, using Ariel didn't bring joy, instead, it stirred up some bittersweet emotions. After all, this magic held significant meaning for her. Suppressing the emotions about to surge within, Ace's eyes flickered for a moment as she glanced at the sword gripped in Riesel's hand. She hesitated for a moment, then looked directly at his face. Want to give it a try? Ace asked calmly. Observing himself and curious about the changes in his body, Riesel understood her intention upon hearing her question. Draw your sword. Ace said calmly. Let me see what your wind looks like. After saying that, she unsheathed her sword, revealing a bright silver sword. However, she didn't grasp the sword hilt, instead, she held and raised the scabbard and casually tossed the sword aside. Seeing this, Riesel's eyes flickered. The girl in front of him was the strongest swordswoman in Orario, a true first-class adventurer. She was powerful. At least, for his present self, she was an object almost impossible to reach. Leaving aside everything else, just the difference in their levels was like heaven and earth, something incomparable. In this world, just one level gap alone represents a huge difference. Moreover, with each level up, the increase in power could be described as a whole evolution. Therefore, in this world, let alone facing a level 5 first-class adventurer, even a level 2 third-class adventurer, Riesel had almost no chance of winning at the moment. But so what? Facing a powerful opponent and being able to throw a challenge at any time was quite exciting, wasn't it? Ba dump, ba dump, ba dump. His heartbeat accelerated, and a familiar excitement surged in his heart. Please teach me. As he unsheathed his sword, Riesel wasted no time in assuming a stance, pointing the sharp tip towards Ace's throat. In his eyes, a hint of coldness emerged, completely contradictory to his inner feelings. Ace, who had been acting nonchalantly, seemed to sense something. Her heart tightened while her body subtly tensed up. It felt as if she was being stared at by a ferocious beast, a sensation that gripped her heart. Though not intense or dangerous, it still made her subconsciously tighten her guard. Crack! In that instant, Riesel forcefully stepped on the ground with the wind swirling around his body. With the aid of Ariel, his figure turned into a bullet, charging towards Ace, whose pupils had contracted, marking the beginning of the battle.
Thanks for listening.